Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Chapter 1. The year 2065 has proven to be rich in interesting scientific inventions for the general public. Young Dr. Michael Holliday is inspired by his invention today. Ethan, our invention is going to make us a fortune. I've already figured out how we're going to monetize it, said he inspirationally to his older colleague. Michael, you're still very young and promising. We should think 10 times before we publicize our achievements. We invent with good intentions. If our invention falls into the hands of unscrupulous people, it becomes dangerous. Don't rush into monetization, said a senior colleague. Ethan, how long can you and I stand on the sidelines of life, as if we are observers? It's time to dispel the myth that scientists are people who live in their own narrow world, that everything human is alien to us. You, for example, how long are you willing to put up with your wife's reproaches? While you are here thinking about good intentions and earns a lot of money, organizing leisure activities for rich companies, young and beautiful girls. You, of course, forgive me for my frankness on you, do not notice how long she has long put you in nothing. And all because of the fact that you have little money compared to her. You cannot at the right moment bang your fist on the table and put her in her place. It's time to end it, said Michael, inspired. No, Michael, I think of people first. Not then. You and I are morally responsible for our inventions. If someone breaks their fate, how do we live with that? How do we look civilization in the eye? Ethan said, wiping his glasses. Ethan, you're a golden man, but you're not practical. It's up to you. I've offered my solution. If you don't want to reap the fruits of your labor, it's your decision. I think I'll take the risk of realizing my grandiose plan. Don't complain later that I didn't give you enough. A couple of hours later, Michael was already talking passionately about his invention and his wife. Unlike his old colleague, his wife Adriana, knowing Kim, accepted his idea to get rich with joy. Michael, can you at least tell me what invention is the reason why you can't make a deal with this man? She asked. When the couple was daydreaming about the near future, we invented a method that helps any person to change his appearance to that of any other person. For example, any person can come to us and in a couple of hours become indistinguishable copies of their favorite star, said Michael. Is it makeup? Grinned we all know. Kina is not makeup, it's last century. We use a high-tech material that is no different from human skin. It won't wash off, it won't burn, it won't freeze. Nothing will happen. Even if someone takes a fist to the face, their face doesn't lose its beauty and integrity. And it costs pennies, Michael said. If it costs pennies, how are you going to make a fortune out of it? Wouldn't it make sense to make it more expensive? Adriana asked. You have to think 3 steps ahead. Get a new look. There's more to it than that. But people don't need to know all the secrets at once. After all, what they want is for any of their problems to be solved quickly and without hassle, and preferably for a nickel. With this task, I think we have coped. There is another stage at which the money will flow to us by the river. You'll just see. Trust your genius, said Michael dreamily, leaned back in his chair. And you can make a face for me. Megan Fox would love to have a face like that, said Adriana. No, honey, I don't want you to use our invention. I haven't told you everything. And we won't tell our clients everything. You don't need to change your appearance. You're already my prettiest, said Michael Holliday, hugging his wife. No, I don't. It's not a matter of principle for me. For me, it's about you realizing your vision so that we can finally afford our dream home, so that we can take advantage of services and stay away from the masses, so that we get the best out of life. And then I'll find something to do and start my own business and earn money too, said Adriana know-it-all dreamily. But things were not so smooth in Ethan's family. His wife, the owner of the most popular escort agency in town, Betty, was not happy with her husband again today. I'm Benjamin all day long, and there's no one at home to take out the trash or water the flowers. She was outraged from the doorstep. Honey, I just got home from work too. Give me some time. "I'll do everything," said Ethan, hurriedly putting his briefcase aside and pulling on an apron. "I've given you the best years of my life. So what? I don't need you to do all the housework yourself. I just need to hire a proper domestic staff. You promised me that 3 years ago. Why don't you give up those inventions of yours, those useless lab tests, and come work for me?" Betty asked her husband reproachfully. "Betty, how can you imagine such a thing? Do you want me to quit science and go to work in your escort agency?" asked he with trembling hands, letting his glasses slip down his nose. "What's the big deal? I've been in this business almost all my life myself from scratch, you could say. At first it took a long time to gain clients with our own hands and feet, and when the competition appeared, you went to a new level. I gathered young ladies and brought the service to a new level. You know, no shortage of customers. But managing staff is always a challenge. We need someone who knows how to get my girls out of unplanned situations. It's no big deal. But the money, the real money's out there." "Ethan," said the wife, waving her hands in front of her husband. While the mother and father were arguing, their daughter Christina woke up. "Don't you miss you for 7 days?" said she, hurriedly rolling her pink suitcase out into the hallway and dousing herself. "Where is she going when she has a session coming up?" asked Ethan to his wife with surprise. The wife shrugged her shoulders. "But folks, how much do you need to explain? A tourist guide's job is like that. I have to pay for the trips, I have to run a little more. I'll buy myself a sports car, and then I'll catch up on my studies. Or should I just leave it now? Will you buy me a car?" asked her daughter, putting aside her red stilettos. "That's a question for your father. Dad, you explain to your daughter. Her peers are driving the best cars. Only yours is still driving a 5-year-old Porsche Cayenne." The wife turned the tables on her husband again. Ethan couldn't find anything to say but shook his head. Meanwhile, the daughter was already getting into the car of an elderly millionaire who had booked it from the evening and was waiting for her at the entrance. Chapter 2. "Kathy, you would at least sneak into the room all day long lying, without taking her eyes off the phone," threateningly said the mother to her daughter. But to moms, it would quickly turn into a mess anyway. "So what? Look at her shameless mess. She says so the point is to never be a mess. But you're a girl." Mother was indignant. "That's right, I am a girl," Kathy said, and stared dreamily out the window. The mother looked at her daughter and noticed something suspicious. "Okay, stop. Sit down," she said, and sat down on the edge of the bed. "Are you in love?" she asked. "Why is it noticeable?" asked Kathy playfully. "Actually, he's so cool at home. Look how cool he is," she said, and turned the phone to her mother. Clara saw on the screen pictures of a handsome guy in a brightly colored jacket. She started flipping through the pictures one by one. Here he is in the pool with a cocktail in his hands. Here he is riding over the country town on his flying car. And here he is surrounded by some girls. "Kathy, but he's a bit of a slacker," Mother said. "And that's because he can afford it." "You read his last names," Kathy said, not hiding a blissful smile. "Benjamin Chesterton. So what does that make him? Is this the son of the Chesterton everyone's talking about?" the mother asked and rounded her eyes. "Yes, the son of the most famous Chesterton, and the only heir in the family, and just a handsome guy. And yes, he's not only handsome, he's very vulnerable and touching. He and I have had a couple of private conversations," Kathy said. "Didn't you ask him if he wants the daughter of a simple teacher and a simple construction worker? I wish you the best, of course, but you have to be realistic. They're not going to pair these things up in their own circles. The difference with ordinary people. It will be painful for you to realize it later," she said, and sighed heavily. "Mom, if a woman has a trump card in her hands, it doesn't matter what her background is or what her chosen one wants. I know how to win Benjamin for life," said Kathy, and stretched blissfully again. "A spell. That's the kind of thing that can get you in trouble. We've been down that road before. Well, when we were young, of course. Maybe you should just focus on your studies. Are you gonna have a lot of boyfriends? And let's be realistic about what you can do. You're smart, but you're average looking. There's no need for illusions, said Clara. That's what I mean. I'm average looking, but technology is not standing still. This issue is easily solved. Since you've already learned the whole truth, I'll warn you in confidence. If I come home the other day dressed as famous singer neighbor Alba, please don't faint with your father. It's normal now. You go to a clinic, and in a day you're transformed into any star. Then you have all the cards in your hand. You go about your life with confident steps and conquer all heights. And even Benjamin Chesterton, Kathy said. What, are you the one who's going to change your looks or something? Do you know it's not healthy? Asked the mother. All this stuff about body transformations is made up by envious people. They want people to still torture themselves by going to gyms, beauticians, buying cosmetics, and everything else. It's all a huge amount of money and time. There's 1 million people involved in the process. It's their bread. And of course, they don't want to lose all their customers in one day. So they come up with this idea that there's going to be a transformation. It's something terrible. There's nothing really wrong with it, Kathy said. War. I don't like the idea anyway. Father won't be happy about it, that's for sure. And how do we feel? Raised our own girl, and then now that she's different, it'll be hard to adjust. My friend's son already did that. He took on the appearance of some athlete. He immediately lost his temper, abandoned all his interests, only and hangs out with different girls. He's not interested in school or work, said Clara. Mom, you and your father said that study and work are necessary for a person to live well. And if a person has already learned to live well, why all this fuss? It's time for you older generation to learn to look at life in a simpler way, Kathy said. Clara couldn't find anything to object to her daughter. She only reflected on the mores of youth and began to move around in her daughter's room. When her daughter left on the nearest day off ostensibly for her own business, and then returned in the guise of a famous historical singer, the detectives could have. The mother almost fainted. So you weren't kidding? Did you really do it? The mother was horrified. What's wrong? See, now instead of a crooked nose, I have a perfect eye. Look at those eyes. How can you resist them? And those lips. And I can't stop looking in the mirror, said the delighted daughter, looking at her new face in the mirror and admiring it. Why would you do that? You have to get reacquainted with everyone. I don't understand our times, said Clara in bewilderment. That's the whole point. It'll be a surprise for everyone, especially Benjamin. He's a fan of the singer. Does your Benjamin know that it's Ceci Kamal Bey now a little more than his father? She's from our youth. She must be about 80 years old at least. That was made up by her haters. She just turned 23. She said so herself. And the one from your youth is that her historical double, said Kathy. How much does a treat like that cost? Where did you even get the money? Mother finally found it. What's it worth? No more than my lunch at the university. Yes, that's how much Dr. Michael Holliday recently invented this method. The clinic just opened recently. There's a promotion where they give everyone their dream look for a token dream, said Kathy. I still don't like the idea. Don't forget to introduce yourself to your father, or he'll think something, said Clara, still worried about her daughter's dramatic transformation. Chapter 3. The freshmen had already had time to get acquainted with each other and to mark their interest groups. But everyone was surprised by the son of the Oligarch Chesterton. Having such money, why didn't he go to study somewhere in Moscow, for example, or in St. Petersburg? They asked him on the first day. Probably he had done something wrong in front of his father, and they wouldn't let him go anywhere, grinned another student. Cities and distances are not a problem at all. In my case, there are things to do here. I need to be with my father for a while. Help him with his business problems, said Benjamin, briefly, but the bespectacled man's version of the guilt trip to Batya really hit him. It was true. Benjamin was already in trouble with the law, so his parents kept him around until he turned 25, or until he found a good, reliable girl to be his life partner. But Benjamin didn't plan to tie his life to anyone yet, so he remained indifferent to the female members of the group. For several days now, one bright girl didn't like it very much. She is used to the fact that in any place men's eyes are fixed on her, and they first of all try to make conversation with her. And she herself is pretty good at building rapport with them. She decided to make the first move on an attractive object like Benjamin Chesterton. "Hi, aren't you bored here?" Christina asked Benjamin. "Hi, where can I go? Knowledge is power. It's like my dad says, you have to study science. Are you bored here? I'm free after class today. If you want, we can drive around the city or walk over it. What do you say to that?" asked Christina playfully. "No, I don't feel like it. I'd rather go to my friends. It's more fun with them," said Benjamin. "What kind of friends will you take me with?" asked Christina, not wanting to give up. "But since you want so much, maybe I will. They're interesting guys. One of them is a music producer. There are rising stars, athletes, and all," Benjamin said. Christina's eyes lit up. She had long dreamed of reaching a new level in her social circle. Now she decided not to miss this chance. "Who is your closest friend that you can tell everything to?" Christina asked. "I haven't met such a friend yet. Or maybe it will be a friend. I don't know yet," said Benjamin, trying to get rid of the intrusive interlocutor. "So you don't have a friend yet? Can I say it's a vacancy?" Christina asked playfully. "Well, you could say that. I'm waiting for my ideal. You know who I like. The ideal of female beauty, I consider the singer Sosaka Malibu," dreamily said Benjamin. Christina grinned. "Why do you need that old lady? She just looks our age. In fact, she's almost 150 years old. My mom used to tell me she was popular in their youth. It's just the Cheese King's success," Christina said. "I don't care if she's 370. It doesn't matter. She just has very beautiful and bottomless eyes. When you look into those eyes, you forget about everything in the world. But that's the kind of friend I'd like to have around me. At least I can dream about it. It's not forbidden." Christina was glad that she had managed to get acquainted with her new classmate and to establish at least some connection with him. Now she was eagerly waiting for the lecture to end, so she could go with him to his usual circle of friends. Kathy skipped class that day. Instead of university, she headed to the mall in search of clothes. She ran from one boutique to another, trying to find something that more or less fit. The singer's outfits could surprise her lover, then she should do it extravagantly, she decided. Let it be just in time for him to miss her tonight. Maybe he'd still care. And tomorrow she would appear in front of him and his dream come true. At the party among Benjamin's friends, Christina behaved in a relaxed manner. She had watched from childhood how her mother knew how to guess men's whims and train girls to get their way. At home, she would tell her daughter, "You need to become an important specialist and not to have to watch men's hands and depend on their moods. This kind of bread, though it may taste good, is not good for you." Christina strove to live up to her mother's expectations, but some other force led her in a different direction. In her early teens, she was already close enough to fellow students. They had friends who were already working. They were generous, if a girl gives her attention. So Christina was quietly drawn into her mother's line of work, only through another firm. There she was also advised that she could cleverly cipher her occupation, moonlighting as a tourist guide. The mother was pleased that the daughter was taking a different path. The daughter was pleased that she was now independent of her parents and was making decent money on her own. So it was not difficult for her to unravel Benjamin and make him feel at ease. At the same time, she managed to figure out the mood of his inner circle. Everybody's out. Our esteemed friend Benjamin is entering adulthood. He is now a student, and on this occasion, he must be introduced today. "Well, Benjamin, we'll order champagne for everyone." One of his friends approached him. "No, on the contrary, it is you who should congratulate him and give him a party. I understand Benjamin spoils everyone at every party. Christina answered for him. Before Benjamin becomes an adult, he's already got a collar around his neck. What's next? He's gonna get under his heel, ask his girlfriend for permission. Guys, we're losing our friend, said the friend, and the crowd erupted in laughter. Benjamin did not understand this move of Christina. He looked at her with bewilderment, but he lived and quickly stroked the situation. You can't tame the mice, it's good for them. If someone doesn't like it, he's just jealous of himself, inexperienced in life. Benjamin concluded that Christina is a sophisticated girl ready to stand up for him. From that moment on, he was in awe of her. For the rest of the evening, he did not leave her side. They sweetly and bravely put in place all friends who dared to say something to them. When it was time to go home, Christina asked Benjamin to walk her home. He put her in his flying car, and they drove through the night sky of the sleeping city. Benjamin, you're a magician. I'm so impressed with tonight. I guess I'd like to thank you for that gift, she said. When did you land at the girl's house? Come on, there's no need for anything, Benjamin said, embarrassed. But you didn't even ask what it was about. Maybe you can guess, said Christina playfully. Well, a kiss, I guess, said Benjamin, slightly embarrassed. No, my kisses are not a gift for you, but something to take for granted. You'll see my present one of these days. I probably won't make it the day after tomorrow, but the day after that I definitely will, Christina said, lastly, and reproached from the automobile. Chapter 4. A couple of days later, Benjamin was stunned to see the heroine of his fantasies at the entrance to the building of his university. His feet carried him to meet her. Girl, I haven't seen you around here before, he said to me, averting his eyes from Kathy and her new appearance. Kathy almost fainted with happiness. Yeah, I've seen you a couple times before. My name's Kathy, by the way. Shall we get acquainted? She held out her hand. While Benjamin sang her praises, they went to the auditorium together. When he found out that the girl looks just like his favorite singer and is also his tomb, he was happy. So you are here. Let's sit together on the last desk. I don't know anything about this higher math, said Benjamin. I'm all for it, but don't worry. I always got straight A's in algebra for higher math. Pulled you through, said Kathy. Finished. The first couple got a call on Benjamin's cell phone. Benjamin, hi. I promised you a surprise. Well, it's ready. Just come out to the courtyard. I want you to see it first, said Christina in a happy voice. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna step out for a few minutes. My friend's name is there, by the way, also from our group. Her name is Christina, said Benjamin and hurried to meet her. Kathy felt a pang of jealousy in her heart for the first time, but she didn't realize that this was just the beginning. Meanwhile, Benjamin was stunned to see for the second time today a second girl who looked exactly like his favorite singer in the courtyard of the university. So that's over the top. How did you manage to transform so much? Asked. Let that be my little secret. We women have a lot of secrets. You don't need to know about them. Do you even like the way I look now? Christina asked. Yes, I like it a lot. But there's one thing. There's another girl from our group who looks just like you. So it's like you're one egg. You're twins, and so it's really cool. Cool. Yeah, trust me, cool, said Benjamin, showing his approval. Christina was immediately alert. Who dared to beat her? When she came to the audience and saw Kathy, she immediately realized who her main rivals were. The others in the audience were not surprised at the resemblance. Each of them has already heard or even seen how people change their appearance beyond recognition. The beauty industry helps them in this. However, such a quick, effective solution as Michael Holiday was the first time, and few people knew about it. Listen, girls, you look like sisters. You even have the same height and equipment. How are we going to tell you apart? Surprise one of the girls in the group at recess. In my opinion, by manners, said a smart guy with glasses named Gleb. Looks are nothing, but intelligence determines everything, he added, to somehow save himself from Christina's perplexed look. "It's easy to tell us apart. The one next to Benjamin is me, Kathy. And if Benjamin is not around, it will be Christina," said Kathy. The crowd laughed, but Christina could see that she had accepted the challenge and was now ready to fight to the last bullet. Chapter 5. Benjamin, as usual, was relaxing in a nightclub, surrounded by his friends. When he was just approaching the entrance, someone called out to him from behind. Chesterton delayed for a second. A male voice sounded. Benjamin turned around and saw not far from him a guy in a black leather jacket that was a size too big. But it wasn't the jacket that impressed him the most. The very fact of this man's appearance in his life, Benjamin felt a shiver run through his body. "You, William, hi. What are you doing here?" he asked in utter confusion. Rule could barely keep his gaze on his face. Boys, his eyes darted rough scars all over William's face. "Such fates. And you thought I was rotting in a hospital bed. Wrong if I thought that. I found my strength and survived, and now I intend to achieve my own." "By all means," William said. Benjamin's eyes flashed back to the events of 3 years ago. William was his best friend. They had gone to programming school together. William had shown great promise. Even at that time, he was already taking orders from time to time and earning good money. There were never any secrets or disagreements between him and Benjamin. Benjamin, meanwhile, often went with his father to his office, where he gave instructions to his managers. "Everything must have a financial component, otherwise our actions are immoral," he used to say in order to motivate his employees. As a teenager, Benjamin took these words too literally. In addition, the story of his friend William, who was already earning his own money, made him think about his own source of income. "Dad, I want to go into business like you and make a lot of money." "How did you tell your dad? What's the problem?" "I'm very happy that my son is so strongly motivated. All you have to do is find a field, and I'll help in any way I can," his father assured him at the time. Benjamin relied entirely on William in this matter. He conveyed his father's intentions to support their endeavor. William shrugged his shoulders and said that for the time being he intended to support himself as a teenager, and that he would only start thinking about his own business after he had received a higher education. But the idea of having his own income did not give Benjamin any rest when he came up with a plan on his own. It was a software development in the banking sphere, which Benjamin learned about in some other country. William immediately understood the idea and wrote the program. Benjamin started to implement it. He gathered a team and started to earn the first money, until unscrupulous people laid their eyes on their business. William noticed it right away and said, "You should tell your father that we are being persecuted and want to take away our business. If the bandits find out whose son we are, they'll leave us alone. This way they think we're just young guys who decided to take off on our own. So for some reason, I wasn't gonna listen to my friend. Don't worry about it. In business, it's normal to get in trouble. I've seen my father deal with these things all my life. He doesn't complain to anyone. He talks to everyone and solves everything himself. I have to learn to be independent too," she said. But William doubted whether they could manage on their own. One day, a stranger came over, introduced himself as someone's lawyer, charged that their program had violated someone's rights, and billed them for moral damages. William again insisted that Benjamin consult with his father about how to handle the situation. Benjamin again acted cocky. "Don't worry, William, we won't pay them any money. If he comes again, we'll call him in for a one-on-one talk. And then we'll work it out," Benjamin said, and ignored him. A couple weeks later, 3 men came to them. The demands were the same, only this time they demanded a much larger sum than the last time. Benjamin kept his word and arranged a man-to-man talk on the waterfront, where they went with their friends in 2 cars. William was among them. The conversation did not work out. As soon as Benjamin tried to object, 2 unfamiliar adult males called their accomplices, and a group fight ensued. Benjamin immediately figured that his boys could not handle such a powerful attack. He managed to gather his friends into one automobile and drove away. They noticed William's absence among them too late. Only then did one of them call the police to report the fight. Anonymously, a couple days later, Benjamin showed up at the hospital with a wad of cash. "Buddy, you did good, but no hard feelings. You know my dad. He's already warned me twice. If there's trouble with the police again, he won't put me in for a while. He'll put his business in. You get better and try not to make a fuss with the police." Then we took care of it ourselves, Benjamin said and left. William decided to go along with his friend again. He didn't file a police report and explained it to the doctors as a random street scuffle. Only a month later, when he was finally allowed to stand up, William went to the mirror, and when he saw his reflection, he almost fainted. His face was completely covered with lines. The doctor later told him that they were slash wounds. He advised him to have plastic surgery later and get his face cleaned up. But the plastic surgeon turned out to be honest. He said that the face would not become the same. There would still be rough features and a lack of symmetry. After William was discharged from the hospital, he decided never to make eye contact with people again. He had no parents, and his few friends and acquaintances no longer recognized him on the street. They simply expressed sympathy and advised him to look for solutions. This continued until William had exhausted his money supply. And then he decided to start a new life by all means. So he first sent his resume with a photo of himself before the tragic events. He was approved and called in for his interview. But as soon as the girl from the personnel department saw the guy with a disfigured face, she hurried to finish the interview as quickly as possible. Out of politeness, she promised that William would be contacted soon, but no call was made. At the next interview, a girl of William's age was also caught. When it was William's turn and he crossed the threshold of the office, she screamed with fright and was about to call William's security. He had to urgently apologize and removed himself from the office. In the future, he began to send resumes without a photo, but indicated that he had defects in appearance. However, no one responded to his resumes anymore. William guessed why. "Benjamin, I need help. They said my face could be fixed with plastic surgery, but it turns out it's expensive. I came to you as a friend. Maybe you can help me out for now. And then I'll get a job, and I'll be with you," William said. Benjamin avoided this outcome the most. Someone had already informed his father that he was dealing with criminal elements again, and had even been reported to the police. His father was extremely concerned about the matter. He carefully asked Benjamin about the circumstances of the incident, but Benjamin did not reveal anything so as not to lose his father's trust. And if he learned of William's appearance, the old secret risked becoming known to spoil Benjamin's prospects. Benjamin hastily slipped his hands into his pocket and pulled out some bills. "Take this one for now. I don't have any more cash on me. You and I will meet again in the next few days and I will give the required amount," Benjamin said in a hurry. "But you can do something, even without money," said William. "All you have to do is talk to your father and get a reference for me so that I can somehow increase my chances of getting a job. And that's not gonna be easy. I'll tell you my dad doesn't like to vouch for others, but I'll talk to him about it and let you know." "You live at the same old address?" Benjamin asked. "No, mostly at the train stations," answered William. Then Benjamin chose some words to cheer up his old friend and hurried to the club to meet his friends. William realized at once that he could not count on his friend's help, so he walked away with his head down to wander around the city until midnight. With the money, Benjamin William decided to finally grab a bite to eat at a roadside fast food outlet. While he sat and ate on the big screen, an advertisement for Dr. Holliday's clinic was spinning. "Have you long dreamed of becoming a replica of your favorite star? We thought it was expensive. It used to be. But now this problem is solved thanks to the unique solution and scientific developments of Dr. Michael Holliday. Transformation into a different personality is possible in just one day. And such a procedure costs no more than your lunch in the canteen," said the advertisement. Hearing such an unconventional offer, William had a brilliant idea. A couple of days later, he visited Dr. Holliday's clinic. Smith was met by a beautiful girl and immediately changed in her face. "You can't have a young man in here," she said, looking at William's unfashionable clothes and his unshaven face. "Excuse me, but I'm here to see Dr. Holliday." "I really need his help," said William. "I'm sorry, but we have a dress code and face control." "This offer is limited," the girl said, and started pushing him out the door. William tried to explain his situation to the girl, but it was all in vain. The beautiful girl's attacks were joined by a crowd of girls and women who were sitting in line to the doctor and waiting for an appointment to leave his office with completely different faces, and you could already tell by them that he was homeless. Probably drank his face off too. "Young lady, you advertise yourself as a decent clinic, and here you have a homeless man coming in. What kind of disrespect for your customers?" said one of them. "But I have that case where my natural appearance is 5 minutes away from unpleasantness." William tried to explain, but no one was going to take in what he was saying. After a few minutes of arguing, with his head down, William left the clinic. His last hope now lay in Benjamin's conscience, but the latter seemed to forget his promise in a moment, engaging the two beauties of his dreams with his attention. Chapter 6. "Kathy, if I suddenly look at Christina, you know it's my attempt to make sure I'm hugging you. It's easy to confuse the two of you," Benjamin once said, after my relationship with Kathy was solidified. "But be careful, we may look alike, but there's a gulf between us. Their voice is different, their morals are different, and it's a sport, it's impossible," Kathy said. "That's true. I noticed that a long time ago," said Benjamin. "But still, for a while you kept playing on two fronts." Kathy smiled a sly smile. "I needed that to make the right choice, but Christina disappointed me immediately." "She's too risky with my friends," Benjamin said. "And I thought you were disappointed in her after the photo of her with an old oligarch in an embrace spread," said Kathy. "But that too. Although then she tried to blame it on you. But I determined from those photos that it wasn't you, because you were making me do my higher math homework that day," said Benjamin. "By the way, it was your method with higher math that my parents liked too. They would like to meet you sometime as soon as possible," she added. Lissa couldn't believe her ears. She is madly in love with Benjamin and would do anything for him. And not only is she in a relationship with him, but her parents are already interested in her. "I'm all for it. I'd love to meet them. I think a guy like you could only be raised by very wise parents," she said excitedly. "Well, since you really think so, get ready. I'll try to organize evenings. An acquaintance next weekend," Benjamin promised. Kathy, elated by the upcoming momentous occasion, decided to share her joy with her mother. "Mom, I didn't tell you right away, but I have a boyfriend," she said in the evening in the kitchen, helping to prepare dinner. "How happy is that? But don't get married yet. You need to finish your studies, get a job, and then get married. Tell your boyfriend that," Mom said. "One doesn't interfere with the other." "Mom, you have old-fashioned views," said Kathy. "I'll look at you when you've got a baby crying all night, and you've got a session coming up, and I need an unprepared look. Husband's not happy. Then what do you have to say about it? One does not prevent the other. We've been there, we know." "And argue with Mom," said Clara, not distracted from her piece of text in her hands. "Oh, Mom of your youth, that was a lot to take in. But the next generation learned the right lessons from it all. We have different realities. For example, if I marry Benjamin, I don't have to think about all those worries in his family. It's all handled by domestic staff or robots. Yes, they have robots working everywhere, in his father's office, at home, and in the garden," Kathy said dreamily. "God, don't remind me about those metal monsters. They've put half the town out of work as it is. I don't want to hear about them." So this Benjamin can afford what? He's the son of a Chesterton oligarch. Everybody knows him. That son is about to take his place. He promised to hand over part of the campaign if Benjamin would wise up and find himself a nice girl, a good girl, and he chose me. "He wants me to meet his parents this weekend," Kathy said. You mean the same son of a rich family. I warned you that he might disappoint you, but you're still flying under the radar. People like that don't think of ordinary people as equal. Your Benjamin, of course, can make your head spin for a while, but I'm afraid you'll cry afterwards. It's best not to be under any illusions, Mother said. It's time you changed your mindset to a positive one. I thought you'd be supportive. You'll see, I'll be able to win his parents over, said Kathy, puffing up her cheeks, and went to her room. She was going to do her homework, but Benjamin did not leave her mind. Kathy crammed her homework and went to bed. In the morning, her mother Clara was awakened by her daughter's precise scream. She ran out of the bedroom and headed to her daughter's room. Kathy stood in front of the mirror with her hands covering her face and continued to scream. "What's wrong? What's with all the screaming?" asked the mother. Kathy did not take her palms off her face and cried. "My face barely spoke, Adriana. What's wrong with your face? Show me." Clara tried to see her daughter's face, but she huddled in a corner and continued to cry. "God, what happened? Why don't you explain first? Is something irreparable?" said the mother, and headed for the exit. "Yes, I've turned into a homeland." Kathy shouted after her and removed her hands. When she saw her daughter's new face, she was horrified. Smooth skin. Kathy was covered in solid wrinkles. Her face had lost symmetry. Her eyes were barely visible. All in all, Kathy's face could now be characterized now as a perfect fruit from the market. Her mother clutched her heart and sat down on the edge of the sofa. "I asked you not to experiment on your already beautiful appearance. You're a beauty in your youth. You're still very young. Why did you have to go to all that trouble to transform yourself? My God, what are we going to do now? Where is your doctor who did all this? Dial his number quickly, Dad. He'll take you to him. In the meantime, why don't you tell them you're sick? God, how can you do this?" The outrage was read overnight by the mother. Hearing the complaints of the clients of Dr. Holliday's clinic, replied that Kathy could only come up tomorrow. During the course of today, life for Kathy became a total nightmare. She stopped eating and drinking. She was categorically afraid to go to the mirror and see her ugly reflection. She feverishly studied materials on artificial face restoration. The internet gave out stories, one sadder than the other. Meanwhile, reassured by Kathy's absence, Benjamin decided to pick her up after school. He called her when he had already arrived at her house. Alyssa had to lie that she had gone with her mother to her grandmother and would come only in 3 days. She herself then prayed to God that she would be able to restore her face in 3 days, and when she remembered that in the meantime she was living, enjoying her new face and beautifying herself in front of Benjamin, the ground went away from under her feet. The next day came. Kathy was already waiting for Dr. Holliday outside his office in the early morning hours. He took one look at her and didn't even raise an eyebrow. "This can happen if you do not take good care of your face. The material is very fragile and can be shaped even by strong emotions. But it's okay. There is a way to restore everything as it was and even make it a little better. But this time the cost will be a little higher because we will try on a different material. Since you didn't save the previous one," said the doctor, "do something important faster," Kathy begged. "Excuse me, but what will the cost be?" asked the father cautiously to the doctor. Dr. Holliday smiled with a satisfied look and scribbled something on the paper. His mood was generally upbeat these days, as his first clients were already coming back to him and were willing to shell out any money. And now that the doctor had full power over them, he could name any price he wanted. This was his original idea, which no one had realized much about. If he had set an initially high price, like other inventors, no one would have come to him. And for symbolic pennies came a lot of young girls and boys who wanted to become like anyone but themselves. Now these young people make up the entire line that crowds around his office. True, they all cover their faces with masks and other ways to refuse the services of the doctor now. They do not have the opportunity because to eliminate the sharply appeared wrinkle can also only himself, so to speak, the antidote. He also has a unique one. Seeing the prescribed price, Liam sat down on the chair and grasped his heart. "Doctor, are you sure your procedure costs that much? Even the rich can't afford it." "Well, that's one way of putting it. A man's face is at stake, and a man's face is an indication of his essence. You can go without my procedures, but then you will have to gradually get used to the new reality," said the doctor with a smile, looking at the wrinkles on Kathy's face. "This is outrageous. It looks like a fraud. You can't do this. What will happen to my daughter's face? Obviously, she can't go out in public like that now." "But this amount of money, it's completely out of our family's reach," the father said indignantly. "But no one is rushing you. You can wait until you have saved up the necessary amount. Some people take out loans as an alternative. Well, and if even that does not suit you, then there is only the service of a psychologist, so that your daughter learns to live with her new face. By the way, I can recommend a great therapist. She's in the building next door. Here's her card," the doctor said, and held out his wife Adriana's business card. Kathy and her father left the doctor's office as if they had been dipped in water. If on the way to the doctor's office her father had still reprimanded his daughter for experimenting with her appearance, now he was worried about her. And the doctor's approach caused a wave of anger in him. And at home he was already telling Clara, with great indignation, about the exorbitant cost of the new procedure. "It's unthinkable. We wouldn't have that much money, even if we sold the apartment and had to beg," said Clara. "What kind of nonsense is that? We won't sell the apartment under any circumstances," resented Liam. "Well, what to do with your daughter's face now? Don't you feel sorry for her? How will she show her face in public now? Moreover, she was in a relationship with her boyfriend," the mother said. "Let her sit in the corner and think about what to do next." "I have no options," the father said, and then went to his room. Kathy sat silently with her hands over her face. Her mother approached her and asked her to show her face again, to see into her daughter's face. She was horrified again. It would only take Holiday to restore Kathy's former beauty. Chapter 7. Dr. Michael Holiday is today enjoying life in the huge house he bought recently. His wife, meanwhile, has returned from shopping satisfied and in a good mood. "Adriana, do you think my parents would like our house?" he asked thoughtfully. "I don't know why you'd ask that. You're not going to bring them to our house," said his wife wearily. "What do you mean? Bring it? They're my parents. They are the people who gave me life, upbringing, education, and everything else. In my old age, can't I invite them to my house to live with me for a while? That's not the deal. They're elderly and they need care. And I didn't sign up for that. Elderly people don't do well when they move. They won't like it here," Adriana said. "But I have to try to make him like it. You know, my mom's never been happy with me my whole life. Maybe that's why I've gotten results. But there's something childish inside of me that needs to come out. And now that I'm an adult, now that my parents aren't so principled, it's a good time to iron out the inner resentments. We need time together. I think I'll go over there one of these days and ask them to stay with us. And you, my dear, you could do something other than run to the stores and salons. Maybe some sense of values would come into your head." Michael rebuked Adriana. "But I need time to figure out what I want to be." Adriana said thoughtfully, "Do you have a professional degree? What's the problem? You go and work in a specialty, like me, for example," I answered. "Michael, you feel good because your specialty is interesting. You make a difference in people's lives. What's interesting about my specialty? Nothing. I want to work with people, like giving them advice, and I want them to pay me well," Adriana said dreamily. "There's only so much trouble out there picking up their patients who don't have the money for a second facial transformation procedure. Teach them to accept their ugly looks. That's where the money will be," Michael said. He thought about it for a moment, and then he burst into rapture. "Actually, I've just come up with a brilliant idea. So they come to me for a new face. I do it the first time for symbolic money, and the second time I already put a real bill, and so on up. And not everybody can pay the real bill. Some of them leave. They have to live now with the face of an elderly person. That's how you can gather and do self-esteem training. They really need it, Michael said. I guess this kind of activity works for me. I listened to a lecture by a guru the other day. I can listen to a couple more lectures. The program will be ready. And you, please do not reject those who have no money. Redirect them to me, said Adriana. When finally caught up with the essence of the new family business, she and her husband were happy that now they can use any opportunity for the benefit of the family. Only they couldn't agree on Michael's parents. She told him in no uncertain terms that she wasn't going to have them in her house. But Michael was determined to earn his parents' approval at any cost. He had simply been drawn in that direction for years. Recently, he talked to his friend about it. But he too was puzzled. I don't understand why such aspirations. Michael then tried to explain his position to his friend. You see, many people have such a desire to grow up, to be established, and to build a new adult relationship with their parents, where there is approval, respect, acceptance. I was a bit of a naughty kid growing up. My parents tried in every possible way to guide me to the right path, and their directions were perceived by my childish psyche as violence. That's what's still bothering me today. And if I reorganize it all, I think my worldview will be different, Michael said thoughtfully. Don't worry about it. Michael, let it all go and enjoy life. You can't change your parents for what they were. They'll be like that for the rest of their lives, said the friend. Michael wasn't too upset when even his closest friend didn't get his point. After a while, he talked about it with Ethan, who did not want to participate in the business, but continued to work on their common invention. I see your point. Michael, you are right. It should definitely be done. We are shaped by the totality of our feelings. If a feeling has a place, then it will have to come off of it. Then it has to be related to reality. If you find a relationship with them, then you yourself will have a leap in development. Believe me, I have long been interested in such matters, said Ethan. Ethan, thank you. Once again, I am convinced that you are a unique person. How are you doing? You still haven't thought about joining our cause. It's going pretty well, by the way, Michael said. I know, Michael, but I remembered pretty well. That's not all. You'll see the rest when the time comes, said Ethan. And he continued to work meticulously on his inventions. In the meantime, Michael took a little vacation and came to his parents. They were happy to see their son. Michael talked about his new successes, about the purchase of a new big house, and suggested that his parents move in with him or at least live with them for a while. To which the mother reacted in the usual way. Oh no, you don't. What will happen to my vegetable garden? No, no, no. Who would help me weed the beds, plant cabbage, or remove weeds? She cut it off. But not enough. Well, how many cannot disappear into the vegetable garden? Vegetables are available everywhere now. I need you as moral support. Remember, your entire youth was spent running around. You rarely had the energy to talk to me, like when you were a kid. Maybe you can find such an opportunity now, Michael said. No, don't even ask. I would still think about it, and if you had money, I'd understand teaching my grandchildren. So what's the point of your father and I interfering with your life? The mother insisted. Michael sighed and thought, Mom, I just want to be still your favorite son, like in my deep childhood. And we didn't spend much time with Dad either. Just want to make up for it, said, but all his arguments were in vain. His mother wouldn't go to see him, and his father would only repeat after her. Michael returned to his home in a sad mood. On the way, his head was filled with new ideas about how to increase his capital and how to afford even more goods. What if then his parents wanted to reward him with their attention? Chapter 8. For 3 months now, Kathy has been in a deep depression. The parents couldn't do anything to help. Her mother had barely managed to get a year's deferment on her studies. Otherwise, Kathy is completely bogged down in her life. She walks within the 4 walls of her room. Fox looks at the pictures on her phone over and over again, seeing other people passing away and sinking back into hopeless sadness. After trying several times to call and see each other, Benjamin became frustrated. He did not have time to deal with his relationship in detail. On the other hand, his parents were in a hurry to finally show the beautiful girl who could win their son's heart and influence his views so much. For Christina, the absence of Kathy was a real gift. There were rumors among her friends that Kathy had big problems with her appearance, and she would not soon be able to return to society. Christina decided not to miss this moment. In 3 months, she easily became Benjamin's closest friend, and he was already ready to introduce her to his parents on the day of their meeting. As usual, Christina acted relaxed. Benjamin was proud in front of his parents that he had such a beautiful and interesting companion. Only the Chesterton oligarch was not thrilled with the bride candidate, but he tried not to show it. When the family evening at the restaurant was in full swing, Chesterton stepped out briefly to answer a phone call. No one close to him took any notice. Meanwhile, he managed to catch his sister-in-law in the hallway by the bathroom and grabbed her arm. "What do you think yourself beautiful?" he asked menacingly. "I don't know what you mean." Christina was horrified. "Do not build yourself an innocent sheep. You are the one who accompanies my assistant on his trips abroad, and my closest friend. The restaurateur Klinsky is your regular customer. I remember you well. Maybe you had a little too much to drink." Said, "I'm sorry, you must have me confused with Kathy. She's the one who moonlights on the court. She's the one who's got her eye on Benjamin. And she's been messing with me. Remember, Benjamin was going to introduce me to you 3 months ago, and it was canceled because Kathy had to go away with a regular client. It's just that she also goes to the same transformational coach. She specifically ordered a copy of my look to attract Benjamin. I can barely cope with fighting that girl myself." Christina spouted a pre-prepared cover story. Chesterton did not fully believe the girl's words, but hesitated and let her go. Christina made the right conclusions. She needs to hurry in conquering Benjamin. Otherwise, his parents may interfere with them in the future. How I had no trouble already after 4 months to make Benjamin himself propose marriage and be together for life. The Chesterton oligarch persuaded his son to take his time, to wait a little, but his wife was already under the influence of Christina. In the end, the family played a luxurious wedding. The young were bought a separate house. The father led his 20-year-old son to his business, and the life of all played with new colors, until an unexpected surprise happened. In his life, he was living. Early on a weekend morning, Benjamin hugged his young wife and decided to get plenty of sleep today. And he was living and had plans of his own for today. She was going on a grand shopping spree. She carefully moved Benjamin's arms gently onto the pillow and tiptoed out of the bedroom herself. Not 2 minutes later, Benjamin had to jump out of bed. Hearing a scream from the bathroom, Benjamin came running and saw Christina. She was sitting on the floor with her hands over her face and continued to scream. "What's wrong? Honey, what scared you?" asked. Christina couldn't find the words. She kept screaming and stomping her feet in the bathroom. "Benjamin, get out of here. Don't you need to see this? What's wrong? God damn it, will you at least explain? I was confused, and my face is burned. I put on a new mask yesterday. I think they tricked me at the store. My skin burned." Screaming Christina. "Oh, come on, don't beat yourself up. We'll go to the doctor. He'll prescribe some medicine, and it'll heal. Come on, get ready. I'll drive you." Christina didn't hesitate. She wrapped a scarf around her face. She put on large glasses, let her hair down, and in an hour she was already sitting in Dr. Holliday's office. There was nothing unexpected about this for Michael. In fact, his business had been on the upswing lately. Christina, on the other hand, was serene. "Doctor, didn't you warn me there would be consequences like this? How am I going to explain all this to my husband now? He'd faint if he saw me like this. In fact, any other man would go crazy in fear of my face." "Yes, and began to warn you in the beginning, because our unique material has such a property. It dissolves when a person deceives himself. There must have been some changes in your life. What are you talking about?" "Doctor, this is inhuman. It's cynical and unethical of you. How am I supposed to live with this? Christina resented it. There are two ways. Either a person removes complaints about his appearance and transfers attention to the inner life. Then after some time, the face itself will recover and become more beautiful than C.C. Kimalbi. Or you have to repeat the procedure, and that will only be enough for a few months. Then one has to repeat it again. If one doesn't want to do the work internally, said the doctor. I don't want to hear it. About your fairy tales, about the inside. I need you to fix my face right today. Right now, Christina said firmly. No problem. The cost will be like this, said Michael, and drew some numbers on the paper. The numbers made Christina furious again. The doctor calmly guided her to the only correct solution in this case, again and again repeating his arguments in different words. Michael sometimes wondered himself why he liked to do such cynical things to people, and then to look at their suffering and turn out to be a savior for them again. But big money, impenetrable queues at clinics, rising popularity took his thoughts in a different direction. He quickly switched from thinking to new dreams, and everything fell into place. When he heard the cost of a Christina facial, even Benjamin was taken aback. That's nice. Where are we gonna get that kind of money? I could pull some money out of the company's working capital, but that would hurt our future, and my father wouldn't approve. Maybe there's an easier way. What if you really take an internal approach? Are you crazy? I'm 20 years old and you're telling me to do something I don't know what to do. I need my old face. Otherwise, I can't be held accountable for my actions. I'm willing to do anything for this goal. Screaming Christina. We are thinking about calling again and asking for a part of the money to restore the artificial face. Neighbors might. This was the first time Benjamin was faced with such a dilemma. After a couple weeks of scandals and resentment, Benjamin found a way to get the money. He decided to pull it out of his father's investment in his company. In the meantime, Christina, wearing the same big glasses and scarf, went to listen to Adriana's lectures. Everyone knew about how to love herself with any appearance. Adriana was happy to have more listeners day by day. Money was flowing into their family again. Chapter 9. A year passed imperceptibly. Christina has long since regained her beautiful face as a famous singer and continues to please Benjamin. Meanwhile, instead of increasing income, Chesterton noticed that his son's capital was melting before his eyes. He had noticed before that his son's expenses were too high, disproportionate to his income. Chesterton's wife was not accepting of Christina from the beginning, and when she found out that with her arrival and the money in the family began to leak, she became furious. We have to do something to get our son away from this upstart, she said to her husband. He'd been hatching the idea himself. I agree. I don't like her from the start. I've talked to Benjamin about it many times, but he can't be persuaded. She seems to have opened his head. He doesn't even notice it. He doesn't know about her dark past. She blatantly denies everything, Chesterton said. Do you remember when he lived? He was friends with some other girl for a while, and then she suddenly disappeared. This one was nice, well-mannered, but somehow Benjamin missed her. Isn't there any other girl in the world but that hysterical girl? Maybe he'll meet someone else. If that Christina gives birth again, there'll be no peace in the house. They usually give birth like that, so they have to do something to get a fortune from the family. Chesterton didn't think twice. He usually has many ways to control reality, both his own and others. I know how to solve this issue. It's a lot easier than we think with just one phone call, he said, and started going through the numbers on his phone. Meanwhile, back at the Benjamin house, the hysteria is back. Christina went for some kind of wellness treatment yesterday and came back happy. But this morning she's back in front of the mirror and is screaming for Dr. Holliday. Benjamin, hearing her screams, has already guessed what happened. He didn't even bother to argue with Christina this time. It was useless. That day he had taken another large tranche out of the company's turnover, which his deputies had secretly reported to his father. Chesterton only nodded his head and reassured his employees, promising that this outrage would soon be over. He also warned that Benjamin might need help and support during this period, and they took note. So a mysterious girl appeared in Benjamin's life. She was an ordinary girl from the village who came to conquer the big city. But the task turned out to be not so simple. Student life quickly bored her constantly lack of money, stress, and strain. Then she consciously decided to take a different path. She has had a different life ever since. Cindy spends her time around wealthy guys and they pay her generously. Chesterton decided not to remember how his paths crossed with this lovely young lady. He simply called her up and explained the task. One must first steal one nice guy away from one hysterical woman, and then withdraw from his life herself. Cindy didn't bother to be ceremonious. She went straight to Benjamin's office, knocked on his office, and stated that she was looking for a job from secretary or personal assistant. Benjamin at first wanted to refuse since he already had both, but the advance warning and deputies influenced the course of the case. Benjamin has to get rid of the older woman in the secretary's chair and put the young Cindy in it, and further to translate business relations into friendly relations was not difficult for Cindy. One day, Chesterton came to Benjamin's office unannounced and found them together in the smoking room. He unwittingly witnessed their conversation. You don't appreciate what you have. If your parents advise you to do something, you should think twice before protesting. But I'm old enough to make my own decisions, said Benjamin. Making a decision is not the most important thing. Everyone makes a decision about everything. Life itself forces us to make decisions every day, even every hour. But the point is how those decisions turn out in the end. Therefore, there is no need to rush. In what is even useful to rely on the opinion of others. We want everything to be our way. Then we get disappointed with everything in life, but we forget about our wrong decisions, Cindy said. Maybe Benjamin is right about something. So it is important to be able to distinguish where our desires are and where the right decisions are. The former and the latter may not always coincide. Parents have been down this road many times, and they may have their own valuable insights. It happens the other way around. When you really want your parents' involvement in decision-making, you don't have them. Like in my case, for example, you want to ask for advice, you want to share your innermost feelings, and you don't have that person. You do, Cindy said. And never like my girlfriends, said Benjamin. What do you do at times like this? Asked Cindy. I just ignore them and choose my girlfriend. Imagine a different reality, where both you and your parents like your girlfriend. You don't have to ignore anyone then, Cindy said. Do I have to ignore all the girls in the world? Asked Benjamin. No, she can be the kind you like, or maybe your parents' taste. Either way, you will know your girlfriend well, and you will clearly understand your parents' thoughts, and you will be the kind of person who knows how to communicate all this to your girlfriend. It's called compromising reality. I realize thinking is not in fashion these days. It's easier to chop from the shoulder, turn away, ignore, insist on your own, and forget about the rest. Cardinal decisions have long been our trump cards, but they create internal conflicts, prevent you from living, and warn you against it, Cindy said. Benjamin did not answer anything. Cindy talked for a long time about how Benjamin had been lucky with his fate, that he should appreciate his opportunities, that he should think about education, about gaining life experience. But the thing that surprised Chesterton the most was her final sentences. When you pass all the tests of maturity, it won't matter to others what kind of girl you're dating or what kind of relationship you have, because everyone around you will trust you. You will then have no one, not even your parents, interfering with your life. They will know that even if you make a mistake, you are able to deal with the consequences on your own, she said. Chesterton nodded his head in surprise and walked on. His experiment seemed to have succeeded. Chapter 10. Do you even know who you're dealing with? Shouted Christina, bursting into the police chief's office. Lady, you can't come in here. All matters are handled by the investigator on duty, tried to explain. But he managed with shouting and hysterics to get the police officers to deal with Dr. Holliday's activities. Christina went home with a sense of satisfaction. She had hoped that the police would nail the doctor properly, and he would finally agree to give her another beauty restoration procedure for free. Or for a less affordable amount, not for the cost of 2 towers. But a couple days later, she gets a call. It's the police. You complained about the activities of Holiday the scientist. We checked him out, the cop said. How'd it turn out? He's revised his client policy, Christina said. It's an internal matter for his clinic. But we did a legal assessment of his activities. In short, he has not violated any laws of our country. Therefore, we have no grounds to punish him, the police officer said. How is it no grounds when he earns 1 quadrillion by fraudulent means without warning clients about the risks? The fact is that people go to him by their own decision. No one is forcing them. The doctor hangs on the wall of his clinic that the artificial face will not last long, that it will reform even from wrong thoughts. And then the client himself is responsible for the exploitation of his face. Citizen, don't distract us from our work. Goodbye, said the policeman, and hung up. Christina got even more angry. She decided to go the usual way. According to the U.S., I can't get a deal with the doctor. We'll have to pay him again. You won't refuse me, she said in a sad voice. I don't want to discuss the matter now. I'm sorry, Christina. I'll be home late. I have to take care of business and catch up on my studies. Benjamin answered briefly and hung up the phone. Christina had not yet realized that it was their story that had come to an end. Chapter 11 Road, almost 1.5 years in confinement and depression, had not gone to waste for Kathy. She had learned to live a little differently. On days of listlessness and sadness, she reached into her parents' bookshelf for the first time to distract herself somehow. In one book, she found a heroine with a similar fate, and in another she found a stubborn man who would not give up under any circumstances, and eventually succeeded. With each new book she read, she had a drop of hope that she would someday be able to give herself and go out in life. With each new book she read, she had a sliver of hope that she would someday be able to conjure herself up and face life. On this day, she was inspired by yet another story of a hapless hero's triumph. What the hell? Maybe someone will be interested in my story, she thought, and started writing a letter to the publisher with the title of her story. She didn't bother much. She liked to call things by their proper names. Such was the case with the title of the book, How I Lost My Love to a Girl of Easy Behavior. Kathy in the book described her love for Benjamin, her struggle to win his heart, her attempts to please his fantasies, and of course, her typical failure with the loss of her artificial and then natural beauty. To demonstrate even more vividly, he attached his before and after photos. After sending the letter, she quickly switched to another clinic, and the letter was already forgotten the next day. A month or more later, her mother brought her a letter in an envelope, and in addition to the letter, there was a decent amount of money. It was not so much money that she could get her face back, but it was substantial enough. In the letter, she is approached by a representative of a publishing house. He writes that her book has aroused great interest among readers, and they intend to repeat the circulation. He also unobtrusively asks to respond to emails Kathy writes to readers in order to stimulate book sales. Kathy couldn't believe her eyes at first. Then she opened her email account and was blown away by the number of emails and responses. Complete strangers were writing to her with words of encouragement, admiring her courage, giving her helpful advice, and wanting to get to know her better. Among these letters was even an offer to be the heroine of a TV program. Kathy accepted the offer without a second thought. No, not to complain about her fate and her failures, but to share her impressions from her experiments, as well as to warn others about how deceitful people can be in the field of fulfillment of our wishes. Shortly after the telecast with Kathy following Dr. Holiday, again the uniformed men came, but the man knew his risks, so he did not talk to them. His lawyer Cyril spoke to the law for him. Chapter 12. Dr. Holiday and his wife Adriana today decided to celebrate the successful closing of the criminal case on his activities. The domestic staff had prepared sumptuous tables for them and then vacated the house. She was irresistible in her gorgeous couture gown. Michael was also happy, but the feeling of missing something important kept him in suspense. He decided to talk to his wife about it once again. "Maybe I can finally convince my parents to come live with us. They won't cause you any trouble, but their presence is very important to me. What do you want to do?" "I'm planning to work in the islands for the winter. All my clients are in favor of it. We will grow and develop on the ocean," said Adriana dreamily. "I've talked to them many times about it. They don't agree. They are well aware that you don't like them, so they don't want to," said Michael. "Well, you're weird. They're your parents. You don't have to love them." "You don't have to love them," said Adriana. "But this is our house. You're the owner of this house. You're my soulmate. You should at least have the courtesy to talk to them once in a while." "Oh, Michael, let's not get all sentimental. I've got my own things to do. And you're the Georgian with your parents. Let's not get negative. I want to raise a glass to our successes with you," she said. Michael did not pursue the topic of parents further. That evening they drank wine, celebrated their successes, and made far-reaching financial plans. Toward morning, Michael had a dream in which a huge black swan was sitting on the roof of his house. The swan's wingspan is capable of throwing a man off his path. Michael sees himself from the outside, as if he were a little boy. He is scared and seeks shelter, but cannot find a place to hide. Suddenly, he sees his parents moving away from him holding hands. He runs after them, but it's as if they don't hear him. The black swan now begins to chase him. Michael stops breathing out of fear. The whole surrounding space floats in his eyes. He tries to scream and call for help, but his voice fades into his chest. Michael opens his eyes to what little broken window of his house. Before he could realize what was happening, two men in special clothing grabbed him and carried him towards the exit. Others came in next and carried Adriana out. The street was crowded. Neighbors had long ago gathered around the house and looked in horror at the flames that completely engulfed the first floor of the huge house. They were giving first aid to the ambulance. She managed to inhale smoke and lost consciousness. Michael was on the verge of passing out, but the firefighters managed to put out the fire in time. Everyone moved away. The owners of the house were not badly injured. Michael they sat in their garden, where the barely visible signs of landscaping remained, and looked sadly at the remains of their home. Chapter 13. Kathy decided to go out for the first time today, despite her fate and unattractive face. The main thing is not to pay attention to anyone and not to stay there long. "If you feel that things are going wrong, come home quickly," my mother advised. No matter what happens, I will try to spend 2 o'clock among people, even if they laugh at me or say something insulting in my wake. It won't affect my mood," she said, and proudly rocked into reality. No sooner had she reached the nearest park than a woman's voice called out to her, "How do you know my name?" The older woman, her face completely covered in wrinkles, smiled at her life from the classroom. I know a little more than you might think. I've lived my life. Look at my wrinkles. Each one has a story," the older woman said. "I just wanted to tell you that you really are what's beautiful. You have your whole life ahead of you. Live and do good, and the rest will come," the old woman said to me, and went on with her warm smile. Then Kathy came to the park and took a seat on a bench. 2 lovers were already sitting there. The girl turned to Kathy and also suddenly said, "Hi. I'm glad you decided to go outside. Believe me, the world is not as cruel as we sometimes think it is. And the world also reflects our inner world. You wrote a wonderful book. I found a lot of similarities with you in it for myself, continuing to create and knowing that you are a wonderful person. Thank you. Did you read my book? Who hasn't? In this day and age, when everyone is obsessed with being anything but themselves, books like this are very interesting." At this, Kathy's mood rose to the heavens, and it seemed as if wings grew behind his back. But the world was not going to stop its surprises. On the way home, an older man spoke to her, complimenting her and wishing her creative success. There was a young woman in a business suit who treated her to a chocolate bar and praised her book. There was a young, handsome guy who admired her performance on a TV program. I her courage. But not everything was going so well in Christina's life. Lately, Benjamin had changed completely. He would stay late at his office, and when he came in, he would go straight to bed. No entertainment. Christina decided to talk to him about it. Benjamin, it's not going to work that way. You and I are still very young. We're spending these beautiful years wondering what you're going to do with your job. I've been held hostage to this whole transformation. I feel miserable. We need to have a serious talk about this, she said. Benjamin sat down opposite her and took her hand. Are you right? We're young, and we don't know what we're wasting our lives on. Especially me. But I'm getting smart now. I want to become a worthy representative of my family. If you think the same, you should stop your experiments with your looks and start studying too. Those are the rules now, Benjamin said. What other rules are you going to dictate to me now? How I should live my life? Who gives a shit about school? There are 1 million opportunities in the world to make a life for yourself without all this pointless fuss. You're being badly influenced by your environment. All your father's appointees in the form of your deputies want to turn you into a boring office monster. Come to your senses, fire everyone, and let's go back to our normal lives. We had such a good time. Remember, she pleaded. That time has passed. There must be a measure for everything. I'm not going to backtrack, said Benjamin. How do you want it? Won't you give me money for a new procedure? Or I'll just sit in 4 walls with an ugly face. How long do I have to listen to the lectures of this know-it-all to learn how to look people in the eye with such a face? Christina is hysterical again. Christina, you don't need someone else's face. You were beautiful on your own. Just try to get your looks back, and everyone will be happy. That's not possible anymore either. But then you have to build up your inner beauty. I've heard that many people who are dissatisfied with their looks have worked on their inner world and soared through life on that. Try it. It might help, the guy said. No, you gotta be kidding me. I can't take it anymore. I'm leaving you, said Christina, and started packing her things. When she had packed 4 full suitcases, Christina's ability to think returned, and she sat down to think. But there were no useful thoughts in her head. Then she dialed up her mountain, which had been borrowing their money for the last few months, helping to build sandcastles in her head. Adriana, honey, save me. My young man is kicking me out of his apartment. He says he doesn't care what I look like. What am I supposed to do? Christina, I'm sorry, darling. But right now, I have that question hanging over my head. My house burned down. My husband and I live in the backyard, and every day we ask ourselves, what do we do? Do you happen to know what we should do? Answered them. I know everything, Kina. And even so. Well, sorry, I called another day. You hang in there, said Christina, and hung up. A few minutes later, a cab was waiting for her to her house. On the way home, Christina was still angry and convinced herself that one bad story with one oligarch's son was not the end. There are plenty of rich people out there with her experience and her fighting attitude. She has no intention of staying on the sidelines of life. Holiday's doctors, meanwhile, are looking for hundreds of clients, and now the phone is bursting with calls, and he doesn't answer any of them. Instead of dealing with the problems with his house and the influx of new clients, he went to his old address, where he had started coming less and less often lately. The wooden wicket opened with a creak. An old woman, going through the fruit in the yard, threw her bucket on the ground and ran towards the guest. Son, how long have you been away? We missed you, Michael's mother said, hugging him. I have missed you very much too. How is Dad? Where is he? He asked his mother. Dad is in front of the TV as always. He will be very happy to see you. Then they sat down at the big family table. My favorite berry pie. Michael decided this evening to hide in front of his parents. Mom, Dad, I had toiled and studied and worked and researched and experimented for so many years, and it seemed like I had succeeded. But recently there were events after which I began to doubt my path. I would like to ask your opinion. What am I doing wrong? Why is there something inside of me that is constantly rasping and does not let me relax, said. But it's a normal state. Man, you have big demands on the world. That's what pushes you forward. But no, it's a normal condition for a man. You have great demands on the world. That's what pushes you forward, father said. No, father, you're wrong. This time is different for my son. That's something we should have talked about at some point. I'm glad he's ripe for it. Father didn't stay at the table long. He ate and went back to watching his TV. But Michael and his mother talked for a long time. Son, you've really accomplished a lot. I am proud of you, the mother said when they had talked about everything. Michael felt like that little boy again, who made himself study hard day after day, to be diligent, to be interested in science, and then in time to open a clinic, to make a lot of money. As a smart man, he realized that everything is done in order to hear these words. That day came. That night, Michael slept in a completely different dream than before. He had dreamed some fabulously beautiful dreams and fantastic pictures. When he woke up in the morning, he told himself that life had been a success. He was in no hurry to leave his parents. From that day on, he started talking to his clients differently. He honestly warned them that they would not be able to wear someone else's face for a long time. He also raised the cost for the first treatment and honestly told them that they would have to repeat it many times. A week later, Adriana called. Michael, don't you think you've been on too much vacation? Your clients are tearing down all the doors. Don't we need the money now? Actually, we're living in a rented apartment ourselves, in case you've forgotten. Said all the signs are on. I've assigned the clients to my assistant. Half of them will refuse our procedure when they find out the truth. I'm already telling them that you don't have to strive to become a different person. You have to protect your identity. I don't get it. What are you brainwashed by the village? You're saying they're screwing up our achievement with their own hands. No, I just decided that I don't need to run anywhere now. I should have come to this sooner, but I kept listening to your wishes. And I've been putting off heart-to-heart talks with my parents for an unknown period of time. Said Michael. It makes sense. Your mother always disliked me. So she found a way to bring discord between us. You let her do it, Adriana said, not hiding her anger. Mom had nothing to do with it. She's always been good to you. By the way, I want to take them with me for the winter. I really need them, Michael said. Well, how do you want it? Just let me know in advance before you leave. I want to buy a ticket to the Canaries. I'll be there all winter. And afterwards we'll discuss how to live our lives, said Adriana and hung up the phone. Chapter 14. Kathy came home in high spirits. Clara saw that her daughter was finally smiling for the first time, no matter how ugly her face looked, but when she smiled she became more attractive. Mom, you have no idea. It turns out that there are so many good and deep people in the world, she said, not hiding her delight. Well, and you wanted to live the rest of your life in four walls. How did you come to that conclusion? They came to me and told me everything. I've seen older people who have more wrinkles on their faces than I do, and yet they smile and compliment me. They thanked me for being able to express what is in their hearts. So it turns out that somewhere deep down we are similar to each other, but different only in appearance. How amazing is the world, Kathy told me. All evening, the parents. Then the family went to sleep in their rooms. And in the morning, Clara was awakened again by a precise scream from Kathy's room. She didn't startle much this time. How was it then? Father, what could it be again? Why don't you go and have a look? Did she nudge her husband in the side? No. If I do, I won't have the words to comfort her. I'd rather do it myself. Maybe she's just playing a trick on us, said Liam, and turned on the other side to go back to sleep. She tiptoed to her daughter's room, where the screams and shrieks were still coming from. She cautiously opened the door, and when Kathy saw her mother, she broke out with renewed vigor with a scream that almost muffled her. Mother, look, the face restored to my own face, which looks so much like you and Father, which has always been with me since I was a child. Look how beautiful, how smooth. Oh, my eyes, they glow. I see fire in them," screamed Kathy, bouncing to the ceiling. "At what a price," said Clara through a smile. "But now he's walking around happy with himself. And again, you go to become like some singer or actress?" asked the father, who had lost peace from his daughter's screams and even managed to reach the door. "No, no. And again, no. I am perfectly fine on my own," said Kathy, and jumped up to the ceiling again. So the downstairs neighbors started banging on the radiators. Chapter 15. Cindy caught Benjamin late in the evening in his office. When she walked in, he quickly closed the book and put it aside. "What are you reading?" "Nothing. Just some popular literature. I saw this book. There a girl writes her story of her outer appearance, then inner transformation. I'm impressed. I didn't even know you read books." "Well, I can't be the cats of the rich forever," she thought. But she didn't say it out loud. "Yeah, sometimes I browse the hits," she said instead. "Anyway, I just came to say goodbye." "What's wrong? You don't like working with me?" No, it's fine. Actually, from your father's company, we had a contract for a year. It's expiring and I decided not to renew it. But what about our friendship? Let's be honest. We both know this relationship is going nowhere, but it will be part of the experience. I have no beef with you. I don't think you do either. So best of luck to you and new heights. Glad to sit at the same table and chat sometime," Cindy said, heading for the exit. "Wait a minute. Remember when you said to appreciate what you have?" "Is that still true?" asked. "It's relevant for eternity," said Cindy, and closed the door behind her. Then she headed straight for Chesterton's office. He was already waiting for her. He placed the envelope on the desk and said, "I've been watching you influence my son. I think you're doing the wrong thing, and you're in the wrong place." Chesterton said, "To be honest with you, and in talking to your son, I've come to that opinion as well. But it's not evening yet. I've been thinking. I'll continue my studies. I found a job too, just like Benjamin taught me." "There was a lot of insider knowledge," Cindy said. "You've done the right thing. If you need help, don't run off the beaten path. If you need help, don't run down a crooked path. Come to us. We'll try to find a case that we'll also pay for if possible," Chesterton said. Cindy, with a light sadness in her heart, headed to the training facilities to make some payment and sleep well for her future. Chapter 16. Michael talked to each client at length and sent many back so they wouldn't ruin their looks for nothing. And when he saw the guy with the prize on his face, he realized that today he was going to have a difficult but interesting task. William took a seat in the chair. "How did this happen?" Michael asked. "There was a fight. Cut to the bone. But the scaring won't go away," said William. "Why did you get it so bad?" asked Michael. "I was saving money. And at the time I didn't have any." "How much did you save?" "But I think it's enough. Let's make a deal so you spend the money on your life. And I'll fix your face. And I'll make sure there are no consequences. You can boldly start a new life and love yourself again," said Michael. "Thank you so much. But what's changed? You used to charge a lot of money," asked William. "Something inside me has changed. I was sure that a lot of money would make me a big man in the eyes of society, but I thought I was small. But one day I sat down with my parents and told them all my worries. Then they said they were proud of me. These words turned me into a big man on the inside. Now I have no need to hoard wealth. Now I do it from the perspective of my own mission. Now I heal destinies and try to bring people back to life," Michael said. And he was right about that. A couple of days later, William stood in front of the mirror and did not hide his delight. "Doctor, I think I look like a Hollywood star," he said, smiling. "You are a star, but you don't have to be a Hollywood star. Everyone has the right to be the star of his life, but without fanaticism," the doctor said. 2 months passed, and another patient seemed very familiar to Michael. "You've probably already forgotten me, but I haven't forgotten you," said a young handsome guy in a business suit. Face looks very familiar. I guess we've done business before, huh? The doctor winked. Yes, we have. My gratitude to you is boundless. You didn't take money from me then, but I couldn't leave such a contribution to my life without gratitude. Please accept it, William said from the bottom of his heart and put the thick envelope on the table. But since it's from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you suddenly get wrinkles on your face, don't be afraid. They just appear on the face when the unnecessary things accumulate in the soul, Michael said. The guest did not stay long. Briefly told that he was doing well. Having finished his business, Michael hurried home, where his father and mother are waiting for him. Adriana has all the signs, is also doing well. She had recently called from the canals and said she had met an up-and-coming doctor. Michael did not take offense to her. After all, life is interesting with changes and inner discoveries. This was a phrase from Kathy V.O. Sutkin's book, which people had plundered for quotes, and Kathy herself had started writing a new book. But as soon as she wrote the first page, her mom announced that someone was calling her. Kathy was surprised, for she had no friends left for a long time, and she had not made any new ones yet. She opened the door and saw a long-forgotten face in front of her. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I made you make such a sacrifice, but I understand now, said the long-forgotten face up high. Why aren't you at school? Kathy asked playfully. But probably because I would have liked to go there with you, replied the taller one. And so it happened. They graduated together, each developed in his own direction. True, the adventures in their lives did not end there. But that is another story. Subscribe and click the bell. Molly admired her reflection in the mirror. A tall, slender woman with luxurious hair. She hardly recognized herself. The black dress of classic style shone with a steely sheen, which only emphasized the advantages of her figure even more. Suddenly, a suspicious rustle was heard from behind, followed by a whisper from Nancy's eldest daughter. She's so beautiful, like a cartoon queen. The younger Vanessa said affirmatively, aha. The girls thought their mother couldn't see them, but the mirror revealed their secret agenda. Peeping is not good. Molly turned around abruptly. The daughters squealed with delight. Mommy, we were trying to be quiet. We just really want to see it all too. Vanessa messed up her nose, so you can hear it from 3 kilometers away. Molly grabbed the girls in an armful and kissed each one on the sun-scented top of her head. Wendy Vanessa, the message had nothing to do with it because the mirror gave you away. The older girl walked over and immediately clapped her hands together. Oh, you can see everything. And we thought you wouldn't notice us. Suddenly, the little girl's voice faded. Daddy's coming. After the sisters had secretly entered the parents' bedroom, the door remained open, so no one noticed the appearance of the head of the family. Stephen tried to give his voice a cheerful note, but his face expressed dissatisfaction. Who's distracting our mom? Come on, shoo kittens to your room. The girls looked at each other and ran out of the bedroom. Stephen didn't even throw them a funny joke, which sometimes happened when he was in good spirits. Today the man had been depressed since morning, so even his daughters were irritating him. Molly, too, was all tense, awaiting her husband's verdict. Stephen took a few steps back and looked at his wife for a minute. It was so unbearable that the woman asked in a half-whisper, "What do you think?" "Nothing good. Couldn't you have bought something more decent with the money I gave you?" "Stephen, the only thing I could have bought with that money was a warm bathrobe. My parents gave it to me. I wonder why I'm the last to know. I told you to keep me in the loop, including financially. But it was my parents who decided to help me out. It doesn't matter. You don't live on an island where you could do whatever you wanted. But you have a family, so you have responsibilities and duties." The high spirits evaporated immediately. Molly cast a fleeting glance in the mirror and saw a dim-eyed woman emerge. Stephen noticed the movement. Look at yourself without averting your gaze. Now you understand why I always attend important events. You're in that shabby outfit you spent mad money on. You look like everything. I won't say the number of years out loud. Tears, resentment appeared in the woman's eyes. Stephen, why are you making a spectacle of yourself here right now? You should have gone to your own corporate party. If you're embarrassed of me, I didn't stuff myself into the company. The man jumped up to his wife and looked into her face. You're still raising your voice. You should be dusting me off. I provide for you all. I feed you. I bought this apartment too, by the way. I'm in terrible debt. And all for what? To make my wife turn her nose up at me. Stephen, why did you grab Molly's makeup and throw it all over the dressing table? That was my money too. So you'd better shut up. He headed for the door, but then he came back. I'll give you half an hour to pack. Sam and his wife will pick us up. As for your reproach, I'm really ashamed of your appearance. Can't you see you look like a tortured codfish? I'd love to go to the party alone, but the chief has ordered all the staff to come with their soulmates. So I'm at your mercy, so you can consider my situation hopeless, and pouring his discontent on the unfortunate woman. Stephen already said more calmly, Pays and really very unfortunate choice, but it's too late to change anything. And the hair, I think it's too inappropriate for your age. What's with all these frivolous aunts? I hope my girl's not in that condition. You'll see for yourself. I've prepared everything as usual. The husband went to tidy up his status persona. Molly remained standing in front of the mirror, and she wanted more than anything to tear off her dress and fall into the cushions and let her tears flow. But there was some truth in their reproach to Stephen. She was indeed entirely dependent on him. After all, even for the necessary feminine trifles her husband allocated her monthly funds. And after every trip to the store, she presented him with receipts. And this had been going on for almost 10 years. From behind again, there were light footsteps. The daughters nestled against their mother, as if they wanted to comfort her. And the eldest Nancy whispered, Mommy, and trust Daddy. You are the most beautiful in the whole world, and he scolds you on purpose because he is afraid. What is he afraid of? Don't you understand? What if while Daddy's at work, the Tsarevich comes and takes you away with him? It happened. Remember in that story you read to us, Vanessa, the other day? Molly laughed. Well, I'm not Sleeping Beauty. And there are no princes and princesses among my acquaintances. Anyway, go to your room. Daddy's gonna come in and swear at us again. This threat was followed by an immediate reaction. The girls flew out of the room with cosmic speed. Left alone, Molly corrected her makeup. She once again critically examined herself in the mirror. What a mess of hair on her head. In a minute, the design was evil. There was no trace of it. The woman went through her long hair and then invented Strand's beautiful herringbone and laid the braid on the side. It really did look better that way. For the umpteenth time in just one day, the woman caught herself thinking that agreeing with her husband in everything had become a tradition for her. She had grown accustomed to obediently following his orders, accustomed to his perpetual displeasure. It had gotten to the point where she was afraid to move at night to avoid waking Stephen. But the worst was that her husband takes such servile behavior as a norm. And not so long ago, things had been different. How could she not have noticed her transformation into a slave? This was not the first time Molly had faced this question. After all, 10 years in the scale of one human life is a long time. But it so happened that Stephen imperceptibly became for her not only the main person, but also the ruler of her fate. Unfortunately, she realized it too late, and now she has to bear all the insults and humiliations without complaint. But all this she is ready to endure only because there is a hope that one day she will see again that kind Stephen, who for her was from childhood the standard of a real man. Molly was too young to remember the details of their first meeting, but Jenna loved to recount how her 3-year-old daughter had declared to the world when a new boy was brought into their group, "This is my friend," to affirm that right. The little girl squeezed the baby's palm tightly and led him to the part of the room where the play corner was. The pupils of the younger group fell silent, and the adult witnesses of this touching scene smiled reproachfully. But no one objected to this distribution of roles. Then Molly was not distinguished by a soft character, and on any aggression on the part of her peers responded sharply. And her methods of fighting with opponents allowed the use of brute physical force. Therefore, Jenna often had to blush from the unworthy behavior of a small bandit. Christopher, learning about the mischief of his heiress, proudly declared our vain. Therefore, we have no weaklings in the family. Jenna always said to such praise, "Next time you'll go after your daughter. I can't be the only one to take the blame for her bad upbringing." The man sincerely resented who dared to say such a thing, that fool. "That's what you're going to tell the teacher too, because she thinks you and I are failing in our parental duties." Christopher rushed in with an open mind to stand up for justice, but his optimism didn't last long. Within a week, his righteous fervor waned, and the loving father found any excuse not to cross the threshold of the kindergarten. True, since the advent of mentees in the face of fat Stephen, Molly slightly changed for the better. The same teacher, who not so long ago criticized the girl's behavior, now at every turn praised her Molly a real angel. Stephen is clumsy, and not everything works out for the kid, and she tries to help him in everything. And such tutelage, it pays off. The boy tries to imitate his girlfriend, Molly, and in his school years was for Stephen either a beacon or a guiding star. If he did something on his own, he always looked back at the bullet. Her support for the boy was as necessary as air, but Stephen himself also tried to respond in kind. And even in the 3rd grade, the guy showed his fighting character when he was not afraid of the guys who were 2 years older. 5th graders decided to shake their younger counterparts, and they chose girls as their victims. Stephen stumbled upon the humiliating scene quite by accident. 3 girls from the class, surrounded by immature runabouts, were desperately crying. "Boys, we really don't have any money. We spent it all in the cafeteria." One of the bigger boys spit through his teeth. "What if we shook you like Pinocchio?" The girls cried even louder. But these tears are even bigger. Would the extortionists be aroused? One of them grabbed the smallest girl by the hood of her jacket. Stephen, without thinking of the consequences, grabbed some stick, and with it went to ram the enemy with a shout of freaks. Let the girls go. The hooligans clearly did not expect such a turn of events and rushed away. Saved classmates then told everyone about the courage of Stephen, and the young hero was embarrassed by his sudden popularity. True, his moment of fame was short. When the novice bandits realized that screwed up in front of the 3rd grade, they decided to take cruel revenge on him. And the next day, after the landmark rescue of girls under the eye of yesterday's hero painted a huge black eye, the rescued girls sighed and rolled their eyes prettily. "Stephen, you got it for us too. Now you can cheat off me at home for the whole quarter." In math, the 2nd classmate wanted to drag him into a sick dance class, but Stephen delicately refused all kinds of help and proudly said bruises are nothing. Scars adorn the face of a real man. But Stephen's popularity did not endear him to Molly. When classmates started circling him like flies, she seriously warned them. "He's my friend. We've been friends since kindergarten. And just because Stephen protected you doesn't mean he's going to hang out with you." The classmates didn't have to repeat themselves twice, and they quickly refocused their attention on another subject. But Stephen had already gotten a taste of popularity, and he was angered by Molly's interference. "Why are you meddling where you're not wanted? Maybe I don't want to be friends with you anymore." That statement annoyed him, but it didn't frighten Molly. The girl stopped paying attention to Stephen, and access to her notebook was closed to him. Of course, he could have moved to another desk, and many girls would have been happy to have such a neighbor. But something told him he shouldn't make it public. The relationship with Molly was ruined. The tense situation resolved itself. All the holidays at school were celebrated brightly, but with the involvement of their own talents. When the program of the Defender of the Fatherland Day event was drawn up, all that was left was to find worthy presenters. At the Pedagogical Council discussed various candidates, but the principal herself unexpectedly suggested that we're racking our brains here. In the 3rd, and there's a lovely couple called Molly and Stephen. One of the teachers objected. "They're very young." And that's great. Babies are always seen in a positive light, even if they make mistakes. A common cause brought the friends together again. They did an excellent job, and many said that it was the presenters who were the highlight of the concert program. Molly was in the crossfire of glances for the first time, and Stephen already knew the taste of fame. Then, after the concert, he suddenly realized that Molly could be the bridge from which he could jump more than once. This discovery both shocked and pleased the ambitious boy. He held out his hand to his girlfriend. "Molly, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I said some nonsense to you." The girl was embarrassed. She didn't expect Stephen to say such things. It was out of character. "Come on. Forget it, Stephen. I'm not angry." She smiled openly and immediately realized how much she missed their companionship. Friendship forever, then. Molly laughed. It overflowed her soul with joy, and Stephen sang out, "The friendship is strong. It won't break." A friend in a thin voice picked up, "Won't split the rains and the south." They sang the popular children's song selflessly, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes. And at that moment, they truly believed that nothing and no one could break their friendship, that the world seems very different when you're young. It's a well-known fact. Molly and Stephen were convinced that they should only step on the broad road of adult life, and they will walk on it easily and confidently. Although both of them did not have excellent diplomas, their chances of getting into a good university were high. At that time, there was a demand for lawyers and economists in the country, and the couple decided to apply directly to the capital's university. Molly had doubts at the last moment. Aren't we being overconfident? After all, this is not something, but a very serious institution. Courage beats cities. Remember that proverb. The girl realized that Stephen was encouraging them. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she agreed with him. But what doubt was growing? "I remember, but I feel uneasy. What's with all this downward spiral?" "Molly, I don't recognize you. You've always been brave. That was before. It's all the same at your home school, but here it's Moscow. Maybe you and I can find something a little more modest. There are plenty of good schools all over the country." Stephen became serious at once. "I'll try to prove to you the evil truth of life on my fingers. Indeed, there are many institutes in our beautiful country, but only the capital's universities have an impeccable reputation. Even if your diploma is full of C's with a few B's, the mere fact of graduating in Moscow will be a huge advantage when applying for your first job. I probably don't need to tell you that career growth depends directly on where you start." Molly looked at the guy as if she was seeing him for the first time. They had talked so much, knew so much about each other. Molly understood that Stephen wanted to achieve something, but for him to have such emphatic, pragmatic thoughts, she had no idea. He even seemed like a distant stranger to her now. "Stephen, are you thinking so strangely? I even get the impression you're repeating someone else's words. I can't deny it. I have my moments. But I don't see anything wrong with it. Look at you and me. I mean, we both come from average families. Our parents are positive people, real hard workers. How is that a bad thing? My dad has honorary degrees all over his wall. So what? Where do we put these props? What use is it? Stephen, are you talking crazy shit right now? It seems so to you, because you were brought up on outdated stereotypes. But life changes, and today we have different priorities. Because enthusiasm alone won't get you far. My father realized that a long time ago, but he didn't have time to readjust. He laid it out for me. The rules of life should be initially, as the great poet said, from the young nails to aim at achieving the main goal. Of course, at first it may seem unattainable, but if you set the right accents, everything will work out. Did you surprise me? I've never looked that far. I always thought it was like a computer game. You had to go from one level to the next. In principle, you have a good point, but the main goal should be immediately, using your comparison as a target. Stephen looked at her with his eyes. So Molly understood, and her arguments will not be heard, but still tried. Wait, Stephen, what if we don't get in? And I'm definitely getting in, and I'm sure of it. If I can't get in on a budget, I'll study for a fee. But that's a lot of money. My parents don't have that kind of money. She didn't understand how Stephen could say such a thing, as if in 1 second she became a stranger and an outsider to him. Oh, come on, was it just her imagination, or did she misunderstand? Turns out she got it right. I can't help you there. As they say, to each his own. By the time she graduated high school, Stephen's selfishness was evident even in the smallest things. One day, Jenna gently hinted this fact to her daughter. Molly, I don't like to meddle in other people's affairs, but I don't like the way Stephen is using you. Don't you see that? Mom, it's just your imagination. We're on good terms. He helps me with a lot of things too. I don't notice it. Well, God be with you. The boss is the boss. They left Solnitnogorsk together. As they should. In such cases, the parents gave the admonition, having broken free chicks and believed that at the first time to conquer not only the capital, but the whole world. But Molly flew straight through. She didn't have enough points to get on the budget. But Stephen rejoiced because he passed the competition. Molly cried all day with resentment, but she didn't want to go back to her small town. A girl they shared a dorm with gave her advice. A lot of people fail after the first time. That's normal. The main thing now is not to miss a year. You can find out where you're short, or learn some other useful profession. This option interested Molly, and she went with her neighbor to look for an educational institution. For a whole day, they passed more than a dozen colleges and schools, but everything was already packed to the brim. And only in one college of food industry there were a few free places. But the girls, tired of searching, were satisfied with the result. Molly thought that Stephen would be pleased when he found out that she would still study in the capital. The girl decided to tell him this happy news over the phone. But her friend's reply was a shock. You realize that college is a judgment. Now everyone will look at you as incomplete. I wish you'd come home. You could try again next year. Molly tried to change her friend's mind, but he firmly believed he was right. The girl called him several times, hoping for a meeting. But Stephen each time found 100 excuses to keep the date from happening. Evelyn, the girl they went to college with, noticed. I think your date is embarrassed of you. He's my friend. We didn't have any of that, and it's too bad. No matter what anyone says, but guys like consistency. Yeah, they might have an affair with your girlfriend on the side. But God forbid they get something they used to think was theirs stolen from under their noses. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you to make your Stephen worry. You're an attractive girl, and you can have suitors. Evelyn, do you think it'll work? Are you sure your friend's gonna come running? How do I put this plan into action? It's very simple. Evelyn's method was simple, but most importantly, it required nothing. The executor was also quickly found. Molly was being courted by a guy who was nearing the end of his studies. John was a fan of the Bavarian business and dreamed of having his own restaurant. He was jokingly called the Bavarian Book in college because he knew 1,000 recipes and fascinatingly told about the national peculiarities of the cuisines of different countries of the world. John invited Molly to a cafe a couple of times, and she agreed to keep him company out of boredom. On the advice of a neighbor, the girl began to give the guy signs of attention, and soon he was following her like a thread behind a needle. For the first time holiday of spring, Molly came to visit her parents with John. The parents liked the young man immediately. Jenna he impressed with his knowledge of cooking. The mother whispered enthusiastically to her daughter so that the guest would not hear. Molly, this guy is a real treasure. He's a treasure. Make sure you don't let him get away so you can bite your elbows later. Mommy John is just a good friend of mine. What is it with you guys? Making plans for the future. There's nothing wrong with that, because all parents worry about their kids and wish them well. You already had a best friend, but he hasn't been around lately. He's probably embarrassed to be friends with a girl who's studying to be a chef. I mean, bankers rule the roost these days. Jenna talked about Stephen without mentioning his name, which indicated her strong resentment toward her daughter's former classmate. Molly marveled at how good a judge of character her mother was. But in remembrance of an old friendship, she still stood up for the one she was constantly thinking about. "Mom, you're the one who says you can't judge a person indiscriminately. Stephen has a goal, and he's on his way to it at the moment. Freshman year in any school is the most difficult period. I admit that Eve and I have problems, even though I'm in college. But in the summer, if everything works out well, I will go back to university. That's the right decision. Here, I support you in everything." The holidays flew by like a minute, and the guests had to return to the capital. But Evelyn's plan worked 100%. Literally, the next evening after returning to the capital, there was a knock on the room where Molly lived with her friend. When the girl opened the door, she was stunned with surprise. In front of her, with a bewildered smile, stood Stephen. "Hello, boy." It is not known from what secret place extracted a huge bouquet of flowers. "I'm sorry I'm late, but I wish you a happy spring festival. I couldn't make it earlier. You probably weren't expecting me." "You guessed. I haven't been expecting you for a long time. But what's an old friend for when there are so many suitors around? I heard you got a boyfriend. You guys are serious." Molly's heart was ringing with joy. She had no idea Evelyn's plans would bear fruit so quickly. "Since when did you become interested in my life? Molly, can I come in? It's awkward to talk in the doorway." Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, but your visit is so unexpected that I'm confused about an old friendship. I mean, you're the one who stopped returning my calls. And since I'm not a vowed nun, I have every right to date." "Yeah, of course, it's my fault. But you do realize that the life of a student—" The girl interrupted the guest. "Stephen, I understand it's hard for you. You sleep 3 hours a night. You have a goal, but you forgot one little thing. I'm a student too. Yes, the profession I'm learning isn't that prestigious. But if there are no cooks, bankers, and other professions will have a hard time." The young man looked at Molly as if he were seeing her for the first time. The girl noticed how he blushed to the roots of his hair. By this sign, she realized that her suspicions were not groundless, and Stephen was really shy of her. Society. But the fear of losing such a convenient and fail-safe defense still overpowered ambition. But soon there was another reason that made Stephen protect his friend from outside influence. The guy was pleasantly surprised to learn that in a few months Molly had learned to cook. One day the girl and her friend asked to visit Stephen. He agreed, but warned, "You just don't fall." "But we have everything Spartan." Evelyn did not hold back and barely crossed the threshold of the room. "This is not a room to live in. It's a real den." "Okay. Outsiders, please leave. Molly and I will try to make this place look a little more decent." It wasn't 2 o'clock before the occupants, gingerly looking around, couldn't believe they'd gotten into their room. But even more, the boys were surprised when the temporary hostesses invited them to the table, in the center of which a large pot shone with pristine brilliance. The reaction from the hungry students pleased Evelyn immensely. It seemed to her that another minute's delay, and the boys would go into shock from the increased secretion of saliva. "From what was in your refrigerator, we could only boil borscht. So, dear hosts, don't be sorry for the modest table," but 4 sturdy guys were not up to etiquette, and they greedily pounced on the food. However, the excellent appetite did not prevent them from periodically complimenting the girls on the delicious food as if they were at home. "It's been a long time since I had such a hearty lunch. Today we have a real belly feast." The girls were satisfied with the result of the action, and the guys were inviting them to visit. "Girls, your borscht is like the elixir of life. Come again next time, we will buy more food. Maybe you can make us some cutlets." Evelyn winked, but it's true what they say that the shortest way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Today I was convinced of that. Molly was absorbed in her own thoughts and said nothing. Evelyn tugged her friend by the arm. "Molly, wake up. Listen, what do you think, Robert?" "Robert who?" "Well, the skinny, tall one. And the one with the glasses, he's not bad looking." "No, he seemed nice. The girlfriend's romance with the future banker spun so fast that in the summer the couple got married. The newlyweds rented an apartment, and Molly was left alone in the dormitory. But this loneliness was not long. In the fall, she entered the university on a correspondence course. Stephen also agreed that combining study and work is the best option for a couple who are going to become a family in the near future. Only in this generally happy picture there was no place for John. The guy saw from afar, shining at Molly in the company of a childhood friend, and understood everything without words. No, he did not hold a grudge against the girl, whom he really liked very much. But realizing that his chances were practically zero, he silently retreated. Then he could not suspect that many years would pass and he would play a major role in Molly's destiny. Jenna was unpleasantly surprised by her daughter's decision to marry her childhood friend. But most of all, the woman was worried about John, whom she liked very much. "Molly, have you thought this through? Stephen, he's a selfish bastard. You've had your share of grief with him. Mom, you're being weird instead of wishing us happiness. You make terrible predictions." Christopher did not interfere, but from his look it was easy to guess that he was not excited about the upcoming wedding either. Not until before the celebration itself. He still decided to talk to Molly. "Daughter, I just want to say don't confuse childhood friendship with love. Are you sure Stephen feels that way about you?" "Of course he does, or he wouldn't have proposed to me." But as the emotions subsided after the wedding, Evelyn began to ask herself that question more and more often. All the burdens of family life she had to pull on herself. Even more complicated life, studies. Stephen advised his young wife to quit Molly University. "Why bother with your brain? You have a good profession. Very useful for the family, by the way. I love your borscht and everything you make." "Stephen, you're the one who told me to go for it." "That's right. But I think right now your only priority is our family. I want my home to be warm and cozy and filled with children's laughter. And what will we live on? Let now our parents help us a lot, but they're not going to be pulling their weight forever. I'm not gonna put that kind of weight on their shoulders. I've only got 2 years of school left. Then I promise that I will do everything I can to provide for my family." Molly listened to her husband's optimistic plans and suddenly asked Stephen, "Tell me honestly, why did you marry me?" This conversation took place during breakfast, and the man almost choked on a sausage sandwich with cheese. "Molly, is it permissible to ask stupid questions while eating?" "Well, most women suffer from this bad habit. But I'll tell you the answer to that. I've never even considered another candidate for wife. You and I know each other well, which is good for our marriage. Then you're a great hostess and a great cook. In short, I have complete confidence in you." "Stephen, what about love? Did you marry me for pragmatic reasons?" Molly was astonished by her husband's revelations. She had expected to hear from him quite different words, but he did not think it necessary to say them, even for the sake of propriety. The young woman felt humiliated and wanted to tell her husband everything. But Stephen caught her mood and beat her to it. "Love is a beautiful word, of course, and I understand perfectly well what a storm is brewing in your sensitive heart. But life is hard, and you can't get very far on love alone. For me, it's more important the material side and everyday life. And lyrics are a secondary matter. So you didn't marry me for love, you married me for convenience." Stephen looked at his wife as one looks at a hopelessly ill person. "Yes. What's wrong with that? I'm comfortable with you, and I plan to live my whole life that way. And thanks for the delicious breakfast." The husband still hadn't answered the big question, but Molly didn't dare to ask it anymore because she knew the answer. That day she realized how right her mother was. Everything inside her protested, and the voice of reason shouted, "Get away from him now, or it will be too late later. Where's your pride, Molly?" The young woman did not heed the call and stayed. It was her first sacrifice, made on the altar of, she thought, of marital happiness. Stephen was a subtle psychologist and realized at once that he had won his first victory. Every day thereafter, he methodically suppressed in his wife her own. His dictate was well thought out, and from the outside resembled the care of a beloved woman. Another advantageous quality was possessed by Stephen. He always acted proactively, not giving his wife a chance to recollect. Just a year of living together, Molly turned into a mountain maid of her husband. She fulfilled his every whim at the first request. When Stephen found out that they were having a child, he began to control her every move. Therefore, Molly had to leave the university after 2 years of study. Subsequently, she left in work, which gave her at least a small opportunity to realize herself. The only consolation for the young woman were children. A year and a half after the birth of Nancy, Molly again became pregnant. This period was the happiest in her life because Stephen loosened control and she could afford small weaknesses. Her husband simply adored his daughters and made plans for the future. "We're not gonna stop there. You owe me another son." Evelyn was trying to make a joke. "Stephen, come down to earth. We're already cramped in this rented apartment. Are you planning on having a third child?" "Don't worry, wife. Our living conditions will improve very soon." Molly knew that her husband was not used to throwing words into the wind and waited patiently. She did not pester him with questions because for several years of life together learned that unnecessary curiosity only makes her husband angry, and she didn't want to cause a scandal. One day her husband came home from work in a high spirits. He picked up in his arms, ran up to the neck of his eldest daughter. "Well, my princesses will soon cross. We will have a big apartment in a new neighborhood." Molly was wary. "Stephen, but where did we get that kind of money? Have you forgotten where your husband works?" "That's right, at the bank. I've already taken out a soft loan." "Then we don't have any maternity capital. I even forgot about it." "You should have. We could use the extra money now. By the way, I've already paid the deposit and all the necessary documents. I don't suppose you'd mind if I took care of it." "Sure, Stephen. I don't know anything about legal matters anyway. Besides, you're doing this for the best interests of our family." "Exactly. And I'm glad you realize that. Hopefully, happy news. You're gonna feed me tonight." The woman shook her hands. "I'm sorry, darling. It's really great news. I'd forgotten all about it. I've had everything ready for a long time. And the first, and the second. Tonight, I've decided to make chicken vine." Stephen kissed his wife in the heat of the moment. "And if you knew how much I appreciate moments like that. I'm Stephen too, and I wish there were more of them." But her husband didn't hear her. He went to the bathroom to wash his hands, from where his joyful voice came. "Yes, I have more good news. I've been offered a position as head of security. Of course, I will have to go through some procedures, as it is a very responsible position." Molly handed her husband a clean towel. "You'll do great. It's a really unusual day today. I even feel like the sun is shining brighter. All happy people feel that way. And it's very nice to see you happy." Stephen drew his wife to him and kissed her soundly. And it was a very different kiss from the one he had hastily bestowed on the woman as she ran off to work. It was a special time for the couple. Moving into a new apartment had brought them together, and everyone in the family was fully engaged in getting on with their lives. While Stephen disappeared at work, Molly was engaged in minor repairs to help the young family decided and parents. Even Nancy Vanessa tried to contribute to the common cause, but it was not always successful. When the renovations were finished, Jenna wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with her daughter. "Wendy, are you happy? Or are you trying to be? Mommy, have I ever lied to you? Why are you asking me? You look tired. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. You've changed a lot. Have I aged that much? I mean, it's become dull, and you look confused, and you're always eyeliner, as if you're afraid I'll read something in them." Molly sat down on the chair opposite her mother. Her condition was not hard to guess from the way she nervously rubbed the limp tablecloth on the table. "Mom, even if I'm not completely happy, but only trying to portray it, there's nothing I can do about it. Yes, I often catch myself thinking that I dreamed of a different life. Yes, I feel like a bird in a cage all the time, and I'm aching to break free. But you know I can't afford it. I have kids, and they need a father. Stephen loves girls. They're his. Jenna cried softly. Daughter, what kind of life have you condemned yourself to? I mean, it could have been so different. What I can't understand is what happened to your character. You were so stubborn in your childhood and in your youth. Mom grinned bitterly. Do you know the answers to these questions yourself? Yes, it's my own fault for letting myself dissolve into my husband. All that was left of me was a shadow. I sacrificed everything else on the altar of marital happiness. I may have used a strong comparison, but it's the one that best fits the situation. I don't know what to advise you, but remember that you have family who will always help you. Thanks, Mom. But I still have faith that Stephen and I will work things out. Jenna didn't say anything. She felt in her heart that in this way her daughter was trying to hold on to the last hope that was about to disappear forever, like a star in the morning sky. If the first years of married life, Stephen still sometimes hears the voice of conscience. After moving into the new apartment, he stopped listening to it. He felt he was the master of his life, and anyone who didn't agree with this division of roles, he put a lot of pressure on. Of course, it was Molly who got the brunt of it, although the woman had recently lost all ability to resist. But strangely enough, it was this blind submission that threw the man off balance, and he had to make a lot of effort not to spill his irritation in public on his wife during the corporate party. When they arrived at the restaurant, where the event was held on the occasion of the bank's anniversary, the party was already in full swing. After a short introduction of the guests, the chief took Stephen aside. Your wife is a real beauty. Women in general are the jewelry of our lives. That's why they need to be treated with care. Molly felt awkward surrounded by strangers, but she was not bored alone for long. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded nearby. What a surprise. How nice to see you here. Molly. The woman hardly recognized in the young, respectable man Robert, that longtime student who had won the heart of her dorm mate. I didn't expect to see you here either. Stephen didn't tell me you two were working together. You're not gonna believe this, but I'm just a guest at this party. I work for a company that works closely with the bank. What you don't know, Molly, is that your husband was the lucky ticket. Everyone else in our company has a more modest life, though none of us have any reason to complain. Wait a minute. Robert, why are you alone? Where? Evelyn. My wife's like the Flying Dutchman. You've probably heard of it. Evelyn appears like a mirage, then disappears. She's currently in Italy. You may not know that my wife owns her own restaurant, but that's not enough. She's got her sights set on a whole chain. Molly felt a painful tingle under her heart. She wanted to ask Robert something else, but Stephen returned. He nodded casually to a former classmate. Hi, we'll talk later. The husband wouldn't let go of Molly's hand. Stephen, where are you taking me? By the way, I'm hurting for nothing. I told you to keep a low profile. Now I'll find our place, and you'll wait patiently for me. The organizers refused from the traditional long table, and all the guests of the feast were seated at separate tables in groups of 6 people, so that the participants of the feast did not get lost. Each seat was marked coquettishly with a name tag. Stephen quickly looked up her last name. See, it says Smith. That's you and me. Sit and wait. I hope I'm allowed to go to the bathroom. Your irony is misplaced. Sit down. There's someone else I need to talk to. Her husband's behavior made the woman furious. She could barely contain her emotions. Stephen, why all the trouble? Why did you bring me here to ridicule me, so that I would be alone? As a scarecrow homogeneous not already sick of everything. The man shook his wife's hand and sang in her face. Imagine, I'd better be quiet too, otherwise I won't vouch for myself. And I'll deal with you at home. Never before had Molly seen her husband in such a state, and his last words really scared the woman. Around her there was a buzz of merriment, toasts and congratulations, but Molly felt walled up in a vacuum pack. She raised her glass along with everyone else, but barely killed it and put it back down before eating. The woman was not moved at all. Stephen, on the other hand, was very active and hardly ever sat still. He was having a blast on the patch near the bandstand. Molly immediately noticed that a gorgeous blonde in a gorgeous dress of sky blue color did not move away from him. At first, she did not pay attention to it, but during the next dance, she noticed how the strange woman pressed against her husband. Stephen's hand at this moment was below the partner's waist. Evelyn felt so disgusted. She wanted to wash off that fake filth, but it was uncomfortable to leave the table defiantly. She turned toward the dance floor, but neither Stephen nor that lady was there anymore. Noticing that no one was paying attention to her, Molly left the table. Only an unfamiliar man who was sitting next to her, but never paid her any attention, regretfully said, "Where are you going so soon? The evening is in full swing." "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Molly went to the ladies' room to wash her hands, but she noticed a couple in a dark corner near the closet, hiding from prying eyes. The man and woman were comfortably seated in armchairs, but from their voices she recognized Stephen immediately. "Well, bear with me a little longer. Now is not the time to change anything." A hot female whisper was heard in reply. "Stephen, I've been patient for 3 years. Believe me, I can't have that old man around me. I'm sick of hiding these secret dates and all that. Emily, believe me, I want to be with you too. I have for a long time. But if your husband knows about our meetings, I'll be buried alive." The blonde laughed softly. "She has long known everything, but always forgives me little pranks." "Why?" "Because, sorry, this is a very delicate subject. Let's better run away from here to our nest." "And I can't. I'm there now, my wife. Be patient until tomorrow." Molly did not wait for the end of the conversation, and remaining unnoticed by the lovers, returned to the hall. There was an open terrace in the restaurant, where the already quite tipsy crowd was having fun. No one paid attention to Molly, and she slipped outside. A light breeze condemned her slightly, and she began to contemplate her next steps. But all plans were too bold for her to carry out. "It's all right. I'll tell him what I think tonight." The girls were already asleep, and Molly thanked her neighbor on the playground, who sometimes kindly agreed to look after the small templates. The large cash bill quickly disappeared into the folds of the elderly lady's clothes. "Molly, thank you. By God, it costs me nothing to do you a favor. All the more pleasure to do it, because your little ones are very obedient girls. Most of today's children are spoiled, and your little girls are always obedient and polite. Very little Vanessa even calls me grandma. That's so nice." The neighbor was in the mood for a long dialogue, so the line had to say goodbye to her. "Yes, your help is invaluable, and we will definitely reach out to you and your husband, if the girls have no one to leave them with." The door from the neighboring apartment slammed shut, and the woman breathed a sigh of relief, but not before she went into the nursery to admire her sleeping daughters. How near the door sounded footsteps. Molly immediately guessed that it was her husband. The sound of his footsteps did not bode well for her. Finding his wife in the hallway, Stephen began to nag her with an angry look. Why did she leave? What's with the smugness? I was just sick of watching this feast. The hypocrisy. You could have warned me. I could have, but I didn't want to. How do you talk to me? Stephen, I'm not your subject or your serf. I'm sick of this. Stop taking over my life. Even so, the man never took his eyes off his wife, which didn't promise a quiet evening either. Since when did you become so independent? Why such a bold claim all of a sudden? From the fact that I saw with my own eyes how you and the chief's wife were treating. Oh, you also watched me well. You want the truth. There's nothing left for me to do. How to seek fulfillment of my male needs on the side, because you're like an Egyptian mummy in bed. You're useless, and your borscht and cutlets are getting on my nerves. Husband's insulting words. Melissa's slaps became on the face. A tight lump went to the throat, and Molly felt that she was choking. Stephen, you're the one. It's all coming down on me. What are you? a brainless sheep to blindly obey my every word. But I thought, and I figured it out. This conversation is over. And it's a good thing you found out today. The end of our family drama was inevitable anyway. Going to cook your borscht somewhere else, although you can stay here as a housewife. Stephen Evil laughed in her face. Think about it. I hope I've made myself clear. Yeah, except for one little thing. Did you forget about the children? The man wrinkled his nose as if he had a sudden toothache. You can stay in my apartment for the time being, but I don't have time to babysit my daughters, although I love them very much. Stephen disappeared behind the bedroom door, but reappeared a moment later. He tossed a pillow onto the living room couch. You'll sleep here tonight. This is your punishment for disobedience. That night, Molly did not close her eyes. She was scrolling through the chronicle of yesterday, by seconds remembering the beginning of their married life, but she never realized when exactly the process of destruction was started. That her softness was to blame for everything, she no longer doubted. In the morning, Stephen, as if nothing had happened, got up at the usual time, and in a cheerful voice, said to his wife, "Where's my breakfast?" Molly, too, on inertia, rushed into the kitchen. It took her only a couple minutes to prepare an omelette with cheese. Her husband loved that dish. To avoid confronting her abuser, Molly closed herself in the bathroom and turned on the shower. Through the noise of the water, she heard the front door slam on the kitchen table, a piece of paper on which her husband's confident hand had written just a few words. "I'll be late. You don't have to cook dinner." Molly's eyes went black in front of her. Trying not to wake the girls, she took out her anger on anything she could get her hands on. "Thank you, Master, for not letting them. Not cooking you dinner, and it's a good thing you showed up late. You're better off with that blonde than with your wife. She doesn't stink of borscht like me." Evelyn half-whispered promises of anger accumulated over the years at milk cartons, canned crumbs, apples, and cabbage. She larded the produce with some kind of exasperation with a knife and then sent it into the trash can. The splashes flew in different directions, and soon colored, juicy rivulets flowed from the walls. Letting off steam, the woman was pleased with her work. "That's just great. Now I must do the same with everything that comes my way." As my mommy likes to say, it's a start. Jenna understood without a word. When she saw her daughter and granddaughters at the door, Molly's eyes lit up. It was obvious from her demeanor that she was excited. "Meet the guests, of course. My precious ones come through. Jorah, look who has come to see us." Christopher kissed his daughter and granddaughters. The girls immediately began to pester their grandfather with questions. "And we'll have our own room. Grandpa, will you buy us toys? Of course, you'll have everything. At Grandma and Grandpa's house, you can even walk on your head." The girls squealed with delight and immediately began to carry out Christopher's instructions. Jenna helped her daughter unpack. "Wendy, you're all right." "Yeah, I decided to take your advice and start from scratch. You know how builders have a saying, ground zero. And in my life, it just so happens that yesterday I demolished an old building, even the foundation. Now I have to build it all over again. But I'm not afraid, even though I know it will be very difficult. And it was right to leave him. Stephen will be lost without you. Mom, he found a replacement for me a long time ago. I don't think there's another woman like you in the world. No woman would put up with an arrogant man like your Stephen. But don't worry with us. You won't be lost. And we'll help you find a job. I even have some thoughts on the subject." "That's interesting. Come on, Mommy. What are you up to?" "Remember Camille? Remember our town's first cooperator? She's in urgent need of workers. She's not doing well. She's in credit. And her bar barely generates any income, believing she's working at a loss." The next day, Molly was already on the staff of the local diner. Aunt Miranda's diner was located in the bus station. But in the town, the establishment had a bad reputation because there from early morning to evening there pushed fans of drunken drink. The landlady was delighted to see Molly. "Oh, thank you, Molly. Everyone's running away from me. I don't like the conditions. You'd think I'd be happy with these skewed faces. They come in at the crack of dawn, and they beg for a loan, and then they forget. The word hunt, the left-hand woman laid it on the line. All the nuances of working in an establishment of this type. But Molly was not frightened by the difficulties. She studied the peculiarities of the job for a few weeks, and then she told the landlady, "Why don't you sell baked goods? You could even organize a hot meal here. After all, there is such a flow of passengers at the bus station." Miranda gave the new employee a condescending look. "Do you have a Barbarossa plan?" "Of course, from the outside. Everything looks good. But what I made from the tent pies, believe me, much more than on the trade of beer drink. Look, I've done some calculations." Molly handed the landlady a notebook and sheets of paper with figures. She asked in surprise, "Are you familiar with this business?" "Not much. 2 years of college, then the same number of years at the university. I wanted to become an economist, but it didn't work out. But I still got some useful knowledge." That same evening, a satisfied Miranda beckoned Molly into the back room. "And I've been studying your checklist notes." "Why do I say that?" "Because these numbers remind me of a cipher, like in the movies about spies. Of course, I don't understand this science very well, but I trust you. I'm in a bad situation. I need to fix it now. I agree with everything. But tell me, where are we going to do all this? I mean, that's gonna require additional staff and space." Molly began to explain her plan. "We're going to rent the space. Yes, it would require additional funds, but we can rent the shop by the hour at the restaurant. I've already looked into it, and it would be inexpensive. I know your difficulties, and I can take out a loan. You don't need to hire staff yet. I graduated from college, and I even have experience in the Capitol Cafe." The hostess looked at Molly like she was mesmerized. Then she wrapped her in her arms. "You're my salvation." The woman was so emotional that she couldn't hold back her tears, and I'd given up believing in goodness. But as it turns out, there are still people who are ready to give a shoulder. "Molly, God sent you to me." Although not everything went smoothly at first. The bureaucratic hurdles were particularly annoying. Molly believed in success. One evening, Christopher remarked to her mother, "I've been admiring our daughter these days." In a good way, of course. The young woman laughed. "Daddy, that word always has a good meaning. But I didn't even realize that my person could delight." Jenna supported her spouse. "And you do not laugh at your father, and I completely agree with him. Did you really become like a person after you dumped your banker? You've blossomed. You've gotten prettier. You've got a light in your eyes. Dad, you've been praising me so much right here. Aren't you afraid I'll become a know-it-all?" "No, that's not typical of you. When you were a kid, you fought for the truth, defended the weak. And it's nice to see the old Molly now. So go ahead, my daughter, and start your own business. It was an accidental conversion by my father." The phrase is firmly planted in the innovator's brain. She'd never thought of running a business on her own before. Insecurity got in the way. But the first 6 months of working at Aunt Lisa's showed that it could become quite a real challenge. Later, the owner of the place herself began to talk about it openly. "Molly, you can't go to the back of the house. I still can't believe that my granddaughter has turned into a respectable establishment." Of course, the Alkis are not happy about the changes, but their opinion is of the least interest to me. But moms with babies and old grandmothers like to shop with us. But what I like most of all is the name Aunt Miranda's Pie. Succinct and beautiful. The owner did not exaggerate Molly's merits. Indeed, without her help, it would have been impossible to do such a job in such a short time. Molly already treated the pie as her own brainchild. About the enterprising woman became known in the region, and one day a correspondent from the newspaper came to them right in the middle of the working day. He clicked his camera a lot and asked a lot of questions. At the end of the conversation, he asked Molly, "Why don't you open your own business?" She thought for a long time and then honestly answered, "My life has changed so dramatically over the last year that I don't have time to turn over the chips. I just didn't think about this question." Just a few days later, Aunt Miranda showed up, pie in the air. "You guys, you're not gonna believe this, but I'm getting married. If anyone thinks that at my age, it is shameful to organize a personal life, I will say in all seriousness that it should be done without regard to years. I got lucky in such a big way, for the first time in my life." The staff, which were mostly women of all ages, were oohing and awing. And the cleaning lady even said in her heart, "Good people, if the cover has been stolen, then maybe I'll get some, unlike that model on the runway." The woman walked through the hall, wiggling her hips and waving a mop. Everyone laughed heartily at the colorful number of the cleaner, but it was an ostentatious laugh. "What's going to happen to us now? Miranda, if you leave us, I don't think the new owner will want to keep us. Girls, don't be harsh on these. I assure you that you will not end up on the street, because your new owner will be Molly. So please love and pity." It was so unexpected for everyone that in the spacious room there was such silence that the hum of the refrigerator seemed like the roar of an airplane. But it was Molly who was most shocked. She tried to object to the hostess, but she invited her into her office with her crowning gesture. "I was so excited to surprise you, and I think I succeeded." Molly, your jaw dropped down in a funny way when I announced my decision in front of our friendly staff. The woman was used to the fact that her hostess's vocabulary consisted mostly of phrases not used in literature. What struck her most was the tone with which she was now uttering them. Miranda's whole being and was imbued with sadness. "You wouldn't believe, Molly, how my heart is torn to pieces, for I've grown attached to this town and to my bar. Bug, I'm sorry, pie, but I can't miss my last chance to be happy at any age. And I've met a decent man. Maybe we'll make a model family. It's a pity that my darling lives in the far north, but my son is settled there too. So if things don't work out with my new husband, I'll live out my life with Kevin." "You bet, Aunt Miranda. You'll do fine. But could you sell your business profitably?" "I could, but I can't trust my business to just anyone. And you're the one person I have 200% confidence in. I will try to justify your trust, and I really hope you will visit us." It took a few days to sort out the legal details. Under the terms of the deal, Molly had to pay her former landlady an almost symbolic sum. "You've done a good deed for me, and I'd like to return the favor. After all, not everything in this world is measured in money. I really want things to get better for you." Miranda sincerely wished Molly success, and the words of this kindest woman were heard in heaven. Becoming a full-fledged owner of the pie, Evelyn began to plan the expansion of the business. Soon she bought a small restaurant, which was located near the pie shop. The more successful Molly's business went, the more friends she made. They were mostly men who were eager to win the favor of a single woman. Of course, some were annoyed by the businesswoman's success. The list of the woman's bitter enemies also included the parents of her ex-husband. When Molly disappeared with the children, Stephen believed that she would return. "Nothing will crawl to my feet and will still beg like alms that I took her back. My wife is not fit to live on her own. She can't do anything. And she has no education. She'll just get a job in a diner." These were the predictions Stephen made in the company of friends. On the occasional outing, the boss's wife, he wouldn't get involved for purely personal reasons, but Molly's place was quickly taken by a young female employee of his bank. The man kept in touch with her parents, so he was aware of the affairs of his runaway wife. When he found out she'd gotten a job at the bar, his joy knew no bounds. "I told you I wouldn't be surprised if she married a farmer or a chauffeur." But Stephen's triumph was short-lived. Molly filed for divorce and alimony. It was a twist he never expected. In a burst of emotion, he dialed his wife's number, but she abruptly cut off his stream of invective. "Stephen, now you and I are going to settle everything through the courts. Oh, I almost forgot. The apartment wasn't just bought with your money. In case you haven't forgotten, there's maternity capital. So your daughters have every right to a part of the capital's living space. I hope you won't dispute that fact." The banker was unpleasantly surprised by this news, but then he got some startling information from his parents. When he found out that Molly, in addition to the pies, bought a restaurant, he had a fit of rage. Where'd that miserable woman get the money? She couldn't buy anything without my permission. And here's a whole restaurant. There's only one way to do it. The old way, but it works reliably, and it is necessary to break the horns of this benefactor who sponsors my wife. With this monologue, Stephen forgot that Molly is no longer legally his wife. The woman herself did not even realize what plans of revenge her ex-husband was hatching. She tried not to think of him. If the past inadvertently broke into dreams, she woke up in a cold sweat. The girls rarely remembered their father either. Nancy, the eldest, went to school, and Vanessa went to kindergarten. That year, winter started suddenly. Still in the evening it threw rain, and in the morning everything was freezing. By lunchtime, it started snowing. In a matter of hours, huge snowdrifts grew in the streets. Molly stayed late at the restaurant and hurried home. She felt uneasy for some reason. Someone invisible whispered to her that she should check the pie. To cheer herself up, the woman said out loud, "It's only 200 meters away. I'll go check it out just in case. God forbid, a short circuit or some other nonsense." Gusts of wind or steel directly in her face, and it took her half an hour to travel the short distance along the line. But barely had she reached her destination, a new surprise hit her. She saw a human figure on a bench, almost completely covered in snow. It was a man. I'd given him a bad case of the booze. My God, he's going to freeze. Is it possible to get drunk to the point of unconsciousness? She began to shake this man, who was not at all like the local lovers of strong drinks. The man was wearing an expensive coat and brand-name pairs of shoes. The odor of good perfume interrupted the unpleasant smell of booze. The man did not respond to her active actions. He only mumbled something inaudible and took a few deep breaths. Molly turned the sleeping man over facing the light and was stunned. In front of her was John, whose existence she had already completely forgotten. She began to shake her former beau with renewed vigor. "John, wake up. What brings you here?" Suddenly, he responded with a memorized tongue. "Not what, who. For your information, I took a cab because I wanted to find someone here." "Where'd you get so worked up?" "John, do you even recognize me?" The man stared at her face for a long time, and then straightaway unfolded. "Evelyn, I've been looking for you, but I've been very well received here." John struggled to get up from the bench and looked around in surprise. "So while I was asleep, winter began. Am I an ant or a dragonfly?" Molly laughed. "We'll figure it out later. Be thankful I found you. You'd definitely be mending on that bench before morning." Jenna was somehow not surprised to see Molly in the company of a frozen John. "Oh, what's going on? I didn't mean for this to happen." "Here, Mom, please elaborate." "Then, daughter, don't swear at me anymore. But John called me when I heard you divorced Stephen and decided to come here. Things didn't work out for him either. He'll tell you all about it later." Jenna rushed to rescue a frozen guest. Molly never ceased to be amazed at her mother's resourcefulness. It was only the next day that John was able to have a normal conversation with her. He not only froze in the street, but also felt very bad. One thing Molly realized for sure: John had simply fallen in love with this hospitable little town with equally hospitable residents. They were the ones who had gotten him so pumped up, albeit at his expense. But that didn't matter anymore. After a hot soup and a crumb of strong tea, the man was ruined for good. Molly separated him on the couch and covered herself with a plaid. Jenna sighed. "Such a good man. So unlucky in life. Mom, what's his problem? There's no way I can believe that you, having talked to him for so long, don't know anything about him." The woman waved her hand. "I know, of course, but no details. John got married, started his own business, quite profitable, some kind of restaurants or cafes. And when things got good, his wife left him. She left him without a business. Don't think he doesn't drink. It's just something came over him. But he said he's not gonna give up. Starting from scratch. That means starting from scratch. Mom, are you so worried about him?" Molly, come on. You know John is a good man. And if Mom had her way. I'm not talking. How are things at work? Molly is tired, sitting down. You know, I can't say it's bad, but her mother crouched down in front of her, like something's missing, not a highlight, or I'm missing some detail that's right in front of my nose. Molly, I think you're getting too lost. In such a short time, your restaurant has become one of the best in town. Molly's got her thumbs up. Exactly, Mom, one of the best, and I want the best. Jenna smiled. I recognize my daughter, and you know what I'll tell you. If you want it, you'll get it. And I know you. Thanks, Mommy. I want to go to bed early tomorrow. The chef had a grandson, so he asked me to take the day off. Okay, go to bed. Molly turned around on the doorstep. Mommy's like a girl. I must be a bad mom. The girls are fine. Don't worry. And you're a good mom. It's just hard for you all by yourself right now. And your father and I don't know anything about it to help. Wendy hugged her mother in a fit of emotion. What would I do without you? Early in the morning, she kissed the sleeping girls, ran off to the restaurant. There was a lot to do, and soon she forgot completely about everything. Stephen threw his shirt with annoyance in the face of his new pasora. I do not understand. Is it so difficult to throw the shirts, the machine, and just iron them? The girl calmly threw the shirt on the floor and continued putting on her makeup. Finally, she pulled herself away from the mirror. Probably not. Stephen was furious. Of course not. Then I don't understand why you won't do it yourself. He even choked with rage. And me. And I have to wash my own shirts. But I certainly don't. And anyway, I've been thinking, I'm not happy about this. Stephen watched with huge eyes as the girl quickly threw her things into her bag and sent him an air kiss. It just couldn't be. How could it be? Somebody out there. And just walked out on him like that. No, this is all Molly's fault. She was the first one who dared to do something he didn't want her to do. Stephen struggled to find a clean shirt in the closet. He breathed out a sigh of relief. It was laid out, apparently still Molly's. And then he was so furious. He must suffer here, and he'd be ruined. The businesswoman was late. It's funny as she's an illiterate fool. This business makes money. Although his mother said she had blossomed, and the girls were well dressed, he didn't want to believe it. Somehow he was absolutely sure that if he called Molly, she would come crawling back on her knees. Except, and that wasn't the plan. She should have just had to crawl over and apologize. He would forgive, of course, but not right away. And he'd make some conditions and rules for her. Stephen straight up daydreamed about making up rules, but then shake it off. You might not even make it to work on time that way. As soon as he ran to the bank, he was called to the chief. Stephen was surprised and even grimaced. He didn't really want to talk to the man who was the husband of his former mistress, but there was nothing to be done. Stephen was still a servile man, although he had Napoleonic plans. May I? Come in, Stephen. Stephen went to the table and only now saw that at the table in the corner of the office sits Emily Berry, smiling at him like that. Stephen is even coldly offended. And she's just what she needs. They parted not very nicely, or rather, very ugly. Stephen's head was already spinning. He'd just found out that Molly had filed for divorce. And then there's Emily. So, our dream has come true. I can move in with you. Stephen dumbfounded and looked at her. Are you saying you're gonna leave your husband? Well, of course I am, honey. We've talked about it so many times. He wrinkled his nose like a toothache. It's true what they say, beauty and brains are incompatible, and you're going to work. Emily fluttered her eyelashes in surprise. Why? Why? I doubt that your money bag will give you a generous parting gift, but keeping me in my place is out of the question. Emily stared at him for a while. Then she said, so you don't want me in your life? Emily, you do the math. But Emily was already in a tizzy. She screamed so much that Stephen grabbed his head and just pushed her out of the apartment. To be honest, he was very worried at first. But he complains to his husband. And then what? But it seemed to pass. Now, watching her in the chair, he realized it was nothing like that. People like her don't forgive. "Stephen, I have an offer you can't refuse." Stephen tensed up. "I'm listening to you. We need to help our office. It is not so far away. Only 300 kilometers from Moscow." Stephen shrank back. "That's it. They're gonna send him to some shithole and forget him. Don't worry, it's only for a few months, and then you can go back to work." Stephen understood perfectly well that he had no choice and waved his head doubtfully. But the surprises didn't end there. He stayed in Pinsk for almost 6 months. He came to the apartment on weekends to sleep it off. He waved it off because where he was forced to stay, hot water outages were the norm. He knew that a young employee was temporarily performing his duties and was sure that he would fail him in his work. But he was wrong. The young employee not only did not screw up his work, but made some adjustments that pleased his boss. Anyway, when Stephen finally returned, he was left with his hands in the air. "Sorry, Stephen, but your successor is doing a much better job than you. What am I supposed to do? You promised I'd get my job back. But you don't think I came back to my position at the expense of the bank? You can go back to your old position, or you can look for another one, if you're not happy with it." Stephen wrote his resignation letter in the full belief that he'd be ripped off. But of course that didn't happen. He blamed Molly for everything, absolutely everything. He had a thought in his head that he should go and see how she was doing, especially since he had kids there. Stephen liked that thought. He even called his mother. "Oh, Stephen, I don't know if you should come. Molly's doing really well. I don't think you're gonna like it. I mean, she's doing really well. Would you say her diner is making a good profit?" Stephen laughed, but his mother didn't support his mirth. "She's got more than one restaurant now, and I know she's opened one in a neighboring town." Stephen even choked on his saliva. "Mom, she's got a rich patron. But somebody's got to give the fool a clue. What should she do?" Before we could say those words, Stephen quit, but it didn't matter. It was time to visit my daughters, and at the same time to visit my wife. To look her in the eye. She's been on my payroll for years, and look at her. He didn't say anything else, just hung up. "Well, Molly." Stephen suddenly turned around, wondering what he had in his life. Nothing. Not even a job. Not even any of the ladies around him. Of course, when he was on the horse, everybody was interested. And when he fell down, everyone just passes by and pretends they don't know. Molly was so busy that day that she forgot all about John. But he didn't forget about her. He showed up at her restaurant just before lunchtime. "Can I sit here in a corner?" Molly smiled. "Sure, if it's not boring. I'm having a banquet tonight, and I don't have a cook. So I've got to make do." John resolutely took off his jacket. "There's something to change into." Molly looked at him in amazement. "Jesus, I'd forgotten that you're the best chef ever." John modestly conceded. "Well, I guess you're exaggerating, but I can do something." In the evening, tired and both happy, they accepted praise from the visiting guests. One of them came up to them. When everyone was leaving, "I live in another city, but I really liked it here. What if I invite your team to my mansion to prepare everything for an anniversary for about 100 people? As you know, money is not a problem." John and Molly looked at each other. The woman immediately thought that the saying immediately could buy a new oven. And a lot of other things. After a couple of weeks, Molly decided to ask John what their future plans were. "Molly, I don't know what to say. Let's talk like adults." Molly blushed for some reason. Jenna immediately hurried off on some important business. "Okay, let's do it." She realized that talking about work wouldn't be the end of it, but she was ready. Every day, Molly realized more and more what a mistake she had made. Once upon a time, John was the complete opposite of Stephen. Nancy and Vanessa literally never left his side when he was home. If they never even tried to approach their father with their problems, they never hesitated to approach John. "Molly, you know I called your mom for a reason. I didn't just come here. When I found out you'd left your husband, and I wanted to tell you right away, so I wouldn't be dragged down by reticence. I realized when I saw you that nothing has gone away at all. I still want to look at you and admire you. You know, maybe it's for the best that there's nothing keeping me there anymore. I wish I could start over from when you and I first met." Molly stood up, walked to the window. "I don't know what to say to you right now." John jumped up. "There's no need to say anything right now. Let things be the way they are. It's not like I'm asking for an answer. It'll come on its own. And about everything else, I'd love to work at your restaurant." Molly approached him a couple months later. "John," he understood, gave her a hug. "And I'll make you and the girls happy. I promise." Stephen continued to look for work. The money was disappearing at a disastrous rate. Now he didn't understand how this Molly managed to run the house on the sums he was giving her. No, he was not a fiddle. At the time it had seemed to him that he was giving away very substantial sums of money. Now he realized that to live well, he had to get by. And he'd long since gotten used to that. Finally, luck turned to him, but not in his face. He was offered a position as a petty clerk in one of the banks. Do you even know what position I was in? Of course I do. That's why we've made it easy for you. If you don't like it, you can keep looking. Don't get me wrong. There's no such thing as a bank. And it is one thing when a young, inexperienced employee comes and we invest in him what we need. Or a person who is used to working differently will come to us, and it is very difficult to retrain him. There was nothing left for him to do. How to agree? At least he had time to pay the rent. Then he remembered that there was a court-assigned part of the apartment for Molly and the girls, and that Molly could claim her share at any time. Of course, he didn't believe that, but it was too weird the things his mom had told him about his ex-wife. Closer to summer, he finally got ready to go back to his hometown. He didn't know why he was going, whether to visit his mother or to see Molly. Stephen only remembered that he had children there when talking to his colleagues. All along the way, he made plans on how he'd smear her morally. Clearly, for a town of this caliber, any diner is good. Of course, he'd love to rub her face in every flaw. As luck would have it, his path led through the square where the renovated restaurant was located. Money was tight. Stephen wasn't going to pay, though. Would Molly have the conscience to take money from the man who fed and clothed her for so many years? He parked, took a look around. It's a good location. It's close to the Park movie theater. Traffic's good. Molly really did it, didn't she? Stephen's teeth chattered. He clenched his fists. But you'll be sorry you didn't have a quiet life. He pushed the door open with determination. Molly, there's a vegetable delivery, and it's bad. David doesn't want to sign that they're bad. Molly raised her hand. So Molly, be quiet. Molly was the new manager at the restaurant. Young girl, smart, characterful. There was only one flaw in her. As soon as she got nervous, there was a moratorium, so no one could stop her but Molly. Calm down. I'm gonna go talk to David. If Molly had John, he'd be all over him. Well, you know John's out getting new furniture for the banquet hall. I know. I can't wait for him to get here. Molly. On the one hand, it was a shame that so much hope had been pinned on John, as if she meant nothing. And on the other hand, it was a good thing. She'd have to leave the restaurant for a while. This way she'll be completely at ease. John will handle everything. The woman rose heavily from the table. She's 2 months away from giving birth, and she can barely walk. She felt better when she was carrying the girls. Maybe she was younger, or maybe it was the girls. David, when he saw her, he went down. What man could argue with a pregnant woman like that? He got upset and sighed. Signed some paper. David, you promised my restaurant only the freshest. Well, where am I gonna get fresh? And where do I put the old ones? I thought we were paying you well above market price just to bring in fresh. Yeah, I remember. But I have to try to sell my produce. I'll send my son in an hour. He'll bring something else. Molly smiled. What's he got to do with it? He's always looking out for me. She returned to the office, just wanted to sit down. But then Kelly was back in the office. Molly. Kelly, is there a visitor demanding to see you? At the table, at the premiere. What's going on? Kelly shrugged. I don't know. He seemed happy, but at least it's all eaten. God, what kind of day is today? Molly moved and into the hall. I've had a headache since this morning. At home, the flu was calling the girls. Looks like she wants to be sick too. And she can't be sick. She has a son who won't like it. Molly stroked her stomach, smiled. She remembered how John had reacted to the news that they were having a baby. He'd stood there for a while, just staring at her, and then he'd knelt down and pressed his face against her belly. And I thought I'd never hear those words again. I'm kind of at peace with it. Thank you. She walked down the hall, climbed 3 steps and froze. Stephen was sitting in front of her, smirking. Something was starting to stir in her soul that made her shoulders slump and her head draw back. But Molly quickly came to her senses. There was nothing more to it. She wasn't dependent on him in any way. In fact, Stephen, she's nobody. Stephen, what wind? Yes? I just came to see what gray, uneducated women are up to these days. He saw her belly, smirked at the sherry. That you miscalculated while you were wooing your virtues. Molly felt nausea coming up to her throat. This has nothing to do with you. Why did you call me? Have you changed? The angry snarl backfired. Stephen, I don't have much time. He stood up like he used to. You always had plenty of time for me. Then tell me what you didn't like, will you? You ran away from the truth. But you're the truth. You're stupid. You're ugly. And you're nothing in bed. I don't know what you're offended about. The nausea was becoming unbearable. But Molly smiled in response to her ex-husband's words. Is it just me, or do you sound jealous? Have you seen yourself? Stephen, shirt not fresh on your pants, blisters on your knees. Maybe some people wouldn't notice, but not me. What about your perfect net? You're always perfect, but you're surrounded by suckers, or maybe you're not so cool anymore. She wanted to leave, but Stephen grabbed her arm hard and painfully. And I haven't given you permission to leave yet. Let go, it doesn't hurt. Molly jerked her arm sharply, and Stephen brought his face closer to her. I feel like you owe me a lot. Stephen, let me go. Do you hear me? You are nobody, you have no right. He squinted angrily himself and abruptly let go of Molly. She couldn't keep her footing on the top step and flew screaming downwards. The height was not great, but her position was. Molly fell right at the feet of her husband, who arrived and went looking for her. Molly. The man knelt down. An ambulance quickly. The staff were already running towards him, and John raised a heavy gaze to Stephen. And that's you. Stephen paid the price. He knew this guy from somewhere. He just didn't know where yet. Stephen realized he had to run. He'd better hide now. But he didn't have time. A fist met him on the last step. John, will you answer for this? Are you gonna answer for everything? He ran out of the restaurant, but no one chased him. Molly was falling into darkness, and then out of it came an unbearable stomachache. So much I wanted to scream. Be patient, honey, just a little bit patient. Jenna took the girls. Christopher said he'd give his ex-brother-in-law a proper welcome. He said he had the strength to throw him down the stairs. Molly smiled weakly. Daddy can. Pierced through her whole body again. Be patient, darling. We're here now. Someone was talking over her. Then they were taking her somewhere. She felt a prick in her arm, and it felt very light. Molly closed her eyes. John couldn't find his place. He paced up and down the hallway until an orderly yelled at him. You're walking like a pendulum, but it doesn't make you feel any better. And you won't let me mop the floors. He looked at the old woman confused. I'm sorry, and sat down. She approached him, wife. Oh, don't you worry. We have very good doctors. Thank you. The phone rang in my pocket. Yes, it was Jenna and John. How's it going? How's Molly? The woman was crying. I don't know anything yet. She's in surgery. John, that creep Stephen. He set a pie on fire. How? Just like that. They caught him, but they couldn't save the pie. No one got hurt. No, it was nothing. John, why don't you call me when you know something? Okay. He just disconnected the call when the doctor came out of the door. John stood up and stared at him in silence. Why are you staring at me like that? You'd better watch your wife. About 15 minutes later. And it's unlikely the kid would have been saved by now. You're a premature baby, of course, but a strong one will gain weight quickly. So do not worry. John noisily exhaled. Molly and Molly, your mom. True, you will not be able to have children. We have 3. Well, that's good. John suddenly stepped toward the doctor. Thank you, hugged him, then grabbed his phone. Jenna, the boy's fine. Molly too. We're gonna build a new one. And way cooler than the first one. Wendy opened her eyes and immediately remembered what had happened. She put her hand to her stomach and froze in horror. Immediately her husband's smiling face appeared above her. Don't worry, everything is fine. Our son is alive and will soon be perfectly healthy. Anchor, Wendy, you know. He took her hand in his. When I realized I could have lost you, I thought about how I don't need anything here without you. What's my point? I love you so much that I didn't even realize it myself. Molly smiled, and I love you very much. They didn't get discharged until a month later. Molly was a little nervous. John had only been around for a few minutes lately, and then he'd run off. She couldn't figure out what was wrong. This morning she saw on the news that her pie shop had burned down a month ago. She was furious. Why hadn't he said anything? But she was building him houses. They were driving down some strange road. Why are we driving here? I want to show you something. Isn't that leftover pie? John turned to her. How long have you known? This morning, I just didn't want to worry you. The car had stopped. They were standing in the square just past Chelsea's, her restaurant, and next to them a small building with a nice sign, pastry shop at Sophia's. As you realize, on the other side of town, the pastry shop at Nancy's. Molly felt tears forming in her eyes. John, you and me. John, I remember her. And converted. Molly snuggled into his chest. Well, why was I such a fool and didn't marry you right away? Well, we all make mistakes in life. But if we take our time, our mistake will be our last. Jenna will nail us because she almost cooked all night, and the girls helped her. Molly laughed. She looked at her son, who was sleeping sweetly. Yes, we have to go. Our grandmother is strict. A week after we returned, the candy stores opened. A lot of people had gathered. Molly was worried. John, on the other hand, was completely calm. He now knew that nothing would ever destroy the happiness of their big and strong family. And on top of all this, he had brought 2 pastry chefs from the capital. He had forgotten to tell the line about it, and now he was afraid to. Just a few days ago, there was a trial. Stephen confusedly said that his ex-wife had brought him to such a state. He explained that she had taken away his luck, and in fact, she should be tried. And Molly suddenly stood up. I want to drop the lawsuit. Let him live free. John only then realized how much Molly had punished Stephen. At first, he didn't understand such an impulse, and when Stephen stopped next to them and said, it turns out you didn't do the honest rednecks, so I hate your debt now. John stood up, and Stephen quickly headed for the door. John looked at Molly. She finally smiled. What's the matter? Let him suffer a little. It won't last long anyway. John laughed. Yes, you are a dangerous woman. Molly replied with a smile. I'm just the most loved and loving.